Chapter 1361. Deputy Zhou was well aware that the mercenaries from Mercenary Paradise were formidable. Moreover, the other party had more than a dozen people. If they were to confront them head-on, it would be a strenuous and unrewarding task. Thus, he immediately signaled his men with his eyes to send a signal to the headquarters to send back the coordinates. On the other end, Vermilion Bird quickly caught sight of this small movement from the corner of her eye. She immediately took out her gun, nimbly loaded it, and swiftly fired. The bullet whizzed through the air and hit the wireless communicator in the man's hand with a loud bang. With unerring accuracy, it shattered into pieces and fell to the ground. The man was startled when the bullet scratched his palm, leaving a horrifying bloody mark. He raised his head in anger, only to see Vermilion Bird coldly putting away her gun with a disdainful smirk on her thin lips. Deputy Zhou flew into a rage out of humiliation. "What are you trying to do? Hand him over and leave." Vermilion Bird indifferently spat out these words. She stood tall in the cold wind, looking valiant. Her long, straight legs were strong and relaxed, and her cold eyes were like a wild cat in the forest, sparkling. Mu Lianjue, who was locked up in the car, did not know what was happening outside when he noticed that the car had stopped moving for a long time. He struggled to sit up and, with great effort, inched toward the car window. Arching his back, he used the friction of the car seat to remove the black cloth covering his eyes bit by bit. When he saw the scene outside through the window, his eyes widened in shock. Clearly, he was shocked by the scene before him. The two sides faced each other with swords drawn and soon fell into a stalemate. No one dared to act rashly. Both sides were mercenaries from top forces. Even if there was a gap in strength, it was not to the extent that it was too big. If they were to fight head-on, the gains would not make up for the losses. Deputy Zhou, who was also from the elite, had rich experience and been through hundreds of battles. He knew that biding his time and retreating in order to advance was the best way to do things. Although the wireless communicator was damaged, the signal was still sent out quickly. Mu Yaja was on his way to the scene when he received the signal. He could not help but frown when he learned that a mysterious team had appeared at the highway intersection and completely blocked off all escape routes. It seemed that they were going to kidnap someone. A mysterious team? Mu Yaja was surprised. The information he received was limited, so he did not send many people. However, all of them were elite soldiers from the world's top mercenary group. They were one of the troops that he had groomed, and their strength was not shallow. However, from the signal sent by Vice Captain Zhou's subordinate, it seemed that they had encountered some crisis. Mu Yaja was surprised. At the same time, he dispatched people as fast as he could. He even got a special car and rushed to the destination. Obviously, he did not know who had created this mysterious troop. Yin Tianyu had obviously underestimated Mu Yaja's ability. He thought that Mu Yaja was unaware of this matter. The news of Mu Lianjue's flight to San Francisco the next day was confidential information that he had obtained by hacking into his uncle's email. Mu Linfeng was clearly trying to cover for Mu Lianjue to leave the country. Naturally, Yu would not let Mu Lianjue go. One must know that once Mu Lianjue left the country, it would not be so easy to control him. There was no way he would let him go. Chapter 1362. Speaking of which, according to seniority, he seemed to be addressing Mu Lianjue as his fourth granduncle. He had to admit that his fourth granduncle's ruthlessness was an eye-opener for him. Killing one's brother and father was a cruel act that only happened in the royal family in ancient times, yet it happened right before his eyes. He would never let it go. However, the father-son pair had apparently overlooked a more important person. Mu Linfeng. When Mu Linfeng learned that Mu Yaja's men had abducted someone from the military base, he flew into a rage and quickly sent out a group of soldiers to chase after them. After leaving the hospital, he took a private car to the military base. According to the report from his subordinates, the base had been purged. The so-called purge meant that all the soldiers stationed at the base had been taken down. Fortunately, Mu Yaja had specifically instructed them to show mercy, so they did not deal too heavy a blow and did not cause too many casualties. Soon, news came from the front line that several armed escort vehicles had been stopped by an equally mysterious force at the southern entrance of the Jingbei Expressway. The two sides were in a standoff, and the situation was in a stalemate. He immediately felt that something was amiss, so he immediately mobilized the local police force and made a call to the capital's military headquarters to dispatch another group of men to the southern entrance of the Jingbei Expressway. At the same time, Wuxia was also rushing to the destination. He was quite far away, so it would take him half an hour to reach the destination even if he hurried. On the way, Lu Jinyu gave him a call to inform him of this matter. "Chief, Mu Linfeng has dispatched a group of men to the expressway." Wuxia quickly took this matter seriously. At first, he suspected that the mysterious troop that had blocked the convoy at the highway junction might be from Mu Linfeng's forces. However, when Lu Jinyu told him that Mu Linfeng had mobilized manpower from the military and rushed over, his heart skipped a beat. What was the origin of that mysterious force, then? Hence, he stepped on the accelerator and drove the car to the highest speed. He could not allow Mu Linjue to leave the country under his watch. The car sped along the way, breaking countless rules and running countless red lights. However, his car had a military license plate, so even if the traffic police saw it, they would not chase after him. After all, the military had special privileges in certain aspects. It was important to note that the local police system and the military were separated, each doing their own thing. However, if the military carried out any special operations, the local police force and various forces would have to listen to the military's orders. This was the supreme privilege of the military. This was also the reason why Mu Linfeng had been in politics for many years instead of being in business, and had a prominent and stable position in the Mu family. If one were to ask who held the most prominent position in the family, it would be none other than Mu Linfeng. This was the reason why Wuxia had always been so respectful to him. As a bigwig with a military background, Mu's eyes. Even when Grandpa Mu was still the head of the family, his position in the Mu family was only second to one and above everyone else. Chapter 1363. Thus, when Wuxia openly rebelled against him, Mu Linfeng found it unbelievable and even flew into a rage out of humiliation. Inwardly, however, he thought that the brat had lost his mind to openly rebel against him for a wild woman. At the same time, the manpower from the special forces quickly gathered at the highway intersection. They were all fully armed and had excellent ammunition. Mu Linfeng ordered that no matter what, they had to bring the person back alive. No matter who the other party was, they had to pay a price if necessary. Upon receiving this order, these mercenaries carried sufficient ammunition and guns and rushed over with the determination to exchange fire. Yu clearly did not know about Mu Linfeng's handiwork or that the latter had once again mobilized military forces from the mercenary groups. He remained in the car calmly and called Gong Jia. When Gong Jia found out that the men he had sent were in a deadlock with the other party, he sent more men and rushed over. The three parties were on their way to the same destination. On the surface, the suburbs of the capital looked calm and peaceful, but the game in the dark was already in an abyss of suffering and surging winds and clouds. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to hand over the person, Vermilion Bird no longer showed mercy. Expressionlessly, she turned around and took out her radio communicator, saying coldly, "They're not willing to hand over the person. Prepare to fire." Vice Captain Zhou was shocked. Could it be that the other party had more than a dozen people and there was an ambush in the dark? For a moment, he looked around vigilantly, jittery at the slightest sound. Now that they were outnumbered, it was inevitable that they would be isolated and without help. However, just as Vermilion Bird's troops were about to fire, Mu Linfeng's men arrived. Vermilion Bird suddenly caught the sound of police sirens not far away. Instantly alert, she took out a pair of binoculars from her waist and agilely climbed onto the roof of the car to observe the distance. A few hundred meters away, she was shocked to see more than a dozen military vehicles, with dozens of police cars clearing the way, speeding over from the south entrance. From afar, red and blue lights flashed continuously. The scene of dozens of vehicles driving over was truly spectacular. Yu turned around. At the same time, he keenly heard the sirens from afar and became alert. "Vermilion Bird, what's the situation?" There seems to be a situation. Vermilion Bird jumped down from the roof of the car and reported to him, "There are more than a dozen military vehicles coming here. I suspect that they are from the special group." Mu Linfeng? This was the only possibility that Yu could think of. "I suspect it's him." After all, other than Mu Linfeng, no one else in the entire capital had the authority to deploy so many people from a special grade corporation. While Zhu Ke and Yu were reporting to each other, the military vehicles quickly arrived and completely sealed off the South Pass Road. They surrounded Zhu Ke and Vice Captain Zhou's troops. Then, a few mercenaries with guns in their hands walked down from several military vehicles. These mercenaries were different from the soldiers stationed at the station just now. Between their iron-like faces, there was a cold-blooded valiance unique to the country's machinery. Tisk, Yu suddenly frowned and smacked her lips. Vermilion Bird said in a deep voice, "Don't be afraid, President Yun. I'm here." "No." Yu said calmly. "Then, I think I drank too much coke. The roots of my teeth are a little sore," Yu said faintly. Zhu Ke was instantly speechless and broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 1364. She thought that the little guy was scared and nervous, so she did not expect him to say such a ridiculous thing. Suddenly, Yu uttered a wise saying in a serious tone, "Kids should drink less cola." With that, he put the cola aside. His tone was as mature as a veteran. Vermilion Bird, this squishy dumpling could still say such dry humor at such a critical juncture. That was enough. Yu rolled down the car window and scanned the scene outside. His face regained its usual coldness as he reminded, "Vermilion Bird, you don't have to send us off if it's not necessary. Let's see what's going on." "Yes, I understand." Vermilion Bird nodded and obeyed. The troops dispatched by Mu Linfeng quickly sealed off the road and surrounded the scene. They took full control of the situation and took control of the situation. What Yu did not expect, however, was that Mu Linfeng would show up at the scene in person. According to his original plan, he would arrange for Mu Lianjue to stay at the base and get him to the airport at dawn so that he could board a flight to San Francisco. Just as he had expected, Mu Yaja had indeed made a move. What he did not expect, though, was that the man's men were so capable. With just a group of a dozen or so people, they easily dealt with the soldiers stationed at the base and escaped with their captives. Mu Linfeng felt extremely humiliated. The soldiers guarding the base were all elite troops and were awe-inspiring. How could he not be angry when they were trampled on by a small group of mercenaries? Hence, he had specially selected the elites from the special forces this time. Each of them was tall, strong, well-trained, and outstanding. Once the car stopped and he gained full control, he alighted from it under the protection of the soldiers. Once he got out of the car, he put on airs and scanned the surroundings. His face darkened. Someone immediately came forward to report after observing his expression. "Sir. The scene is under control, we're at your command." "Where is he?" "He's in the car." His subordinate stood straight at the side and pointed at the armed escort vehicle parked not far away. Yu sneered inwardly when he saw the man through the window. This second granduncle of his was quite powerful. Could it be that people with a bit of a special background all had this kind of character? Before doing anything, they would put on airs for others to see. He did have a bit of an air about him. Seeing that the scene was under control, Deputy Zhou's men did not dare to act rashly. It was not because of anything other than the fact that they would not gain anything if they went head-on. Previously, Mu Yaja had given the order to bring Mu Lianjue back. He wanted to see him, dead or alive. As mercenaries, their employer's orders were absolute and could not be disobeyed. Therefore, they treated this order like an imperial edict. However, the current situation was somewhat outside of the plan. Therefore, Deputy Zhou and the rest kept their cool and stayed in their original positions. Before Mu Yaja's reinforcements arrived, they would remain sober and not act rashly. Mu Linfeng sent someone to check Deputy Zhou's car and bring Mu Lianjue out. Deputy Zhou gnashed his teeth in hatred at the arrogant and despotic manner of his men. Chapter 1365. Mu Linfeng suddenly noticed the elongated Bentley parked at the side. Puzzled, he took a look at the license plate, which started with capital AG6, and was stunned. Capital AG6 license plates were rarely issued. Most of them were issued by the central government to international political figures or people under special protection. Cars with this license plate could pass unimpeded no matter where they went. Even if it was a central Nanhai, they could drive straight in without stopping. This meant that they had supreme authority. In the capital, the level of authority was a symbol of status. Thus, a simple license plate could reflect a lot of things. Mu Linfeng was astonished to find out who was sitting in the Bentley. His subconscious reaction was to check the authenticity of the license plate. This was because even with his qualifications, it was impossible for him to obtain such a high-level license plate. The car Yu was in was issued by the central government to Gong Jia. Gong Jia had come to the capital this time to meet some mysterious leaders and negotiate some special deals. Gong Jia was born in the arms industry and maintained close ties with various countries' political figures. A person like him would be specially received by any country's leader. Thus, every time he came, the central government would receive him with high standards and make special arrangements for him. Mu Linfeng was suspicious, so he led his men forward to see who was sitting in the car. Alas, the vermilion bird raised a hand to stop him the moment he stepped forward and held his outstretched hand tightly. Hiss! Vermilion bird's strength was too terrifying. Even Mu Linfeng could not take it and frowned in pain. Mu Linfeng's expression changed, and the atmosphere became even more tense. Seeing that someone dared to act rashly in front of Mu Linfeng, the people beside him shouted, "How dare you? Who are you? How dare you act rashly here? Take your hand away." Vermilion bird looked up coldly and did not move at all. Her handsome face was extremely cold. She only had one master and only listened to Yu's orders. She did not need to listen to anyone else. Vermilion bird did not let go. Instead, she used even more strength and strength. Unable to bear her pain, Mu Linfeng frowned in pain. However, due to his status, he had no choice but to maintain his dignified posture. His sharp, eagle-like eyes shot a warning at the vermilion bird. The adjutant standing beside him immediately went forward and shouted, "I told you to let go. Don't be rash, didn't you hear me? Let go." With that, he tried to break free from Vermilion Bird's grip. Unexpectedly, Vermilion Bird easily caught his hand and twisted it. With a crack, his wrist was broken. The man groaned and endured the pain, and broke out in cold sweat. At this moment of confrontation, the window of the Bentley suddenly rolled down. "Vermilion Bird, let go. Don't hurt the relationship between me and second uncle." His voice was childish, but it was steady. Surprised, Mu Linfeng looked into the car and saw Yu sitting in the back seat expressionlessly. If it were not for his youthful appearance, one would not be able to tell that he was a 7-year-old child. However, when Mu Linfeng saw his delicate face, the latter turned pale with fright. Ichen? Chapter 1366. Yu coldly opened his eyes. A frosty glint flashed across his eyes, and at the same time, his pink lips curled into a cold smirk. "Second granduncle, it's our first time meeting. Nice to meet you." The moment he opened his mouth, Mu Linfeng quickly realized his identity. He was probably the other son that Yun Shishir gave birth to when she was a surrogate mother for Mu Yaja. Just based on his appearance alone, he was very similar to Xiao Yichen. However, the difference was that his extraordinary bearing and gestures were somewhat similar to Mu Yaja's. He had an aura that was different from other children of his age. He was noble, cold, and elegant. His black and white eyes were distinct, and his eyelashes were thick. His adorable face was even more intimidating because of his cold expression. Mu Linfeng suddenly snorted. "Humph. So it's Yaja's little b *st*rd outside. What are you doing here?" When Yu heard that, he laughed instead of getting angry. He snorted a few times, but he could not be bothered with the derogatory term. He did not get out of the car and just sat there elegantly, looking at him calmly. Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, was enraged by his arrogance. While he was furious, he was also shocked. He did not expect that a 7-year-old child would have such an extraordinary bearing. At the same time, when he realized what this child had just called him, he coldly said, "Little b *st *rd. Take back the way you called me just now." Mu Linfeng ordered. Yu turned to look at him disapprovingly with a raised brow. Mu Linfeng scornfully said, "Why don't you take a look at your status? You don't have the right to call me second granduncle." When Yu heard that, he was silent for a moment before he calmly asked, "Right? What do you mean by right?" What do you think? Don't think that just because you're Yaja's son, you can climb up the Mu family's social ladder. That mother of yours has the ambition of a wolf. She secretly hid the Mu family's heir and even wanted to rely on her son to climb up the Mu family's social ladder. Tell her that this is just a dream. Don't even think about it. The arrogant and disdainful words resounded in his ears like thunder. The disdain in his words was obvious. Clearly, Mu Linfeng rejected the child from the bottom of his heart. Don't think that just because you're a child of the Mu family and have the blood of the Mu family flowing in your veins, you can openly step into the Mu family's doorstep. You don't have the qualifications. Mu Linfeng's voice was cold to the extreme. Yu found it funny. She couldn't help but smile. Her pink lips curled into a disdainful smile. Her eyes were cold. I don't know how high the Mu family's branch is. However, I've seen how thick-skinned second granduncle is. Haha. What did you say? Mu Linfeng was furious. What do you mean? I meant it literally. Why? Second granduncle is so knowledgeable, but you can't even understand basic human language? Yu's words were like pearls, and the ridicule in her tone was equally unrestrained. Mu Linfeng scolded, b *st *rd. I'm here, you don't have the right to act rashly. Chapter 1367. These words completely enraged Mu Linfeng, to the extent that he could not restrain his anger in front of so many people. He lost his poise and scolded, "Little bastard." Mu Linfeng was infuriated because he detested Yu. If not for Yu's appearance, perhaps his plan would not have been completely disrupted. His appearance was the biggest failure of this plan. If not for him, he would not have been in such a passive position. Yu smiled elegantly when he heard this. It was as if he was not angered by Mu Linfeng's ungentlemanly insult. He only said meaningfully, "I finally understand what that saying means." Mu Linfeng glanced at him coldly from the corner of his eye. However, Yu continued unhurriedly, "I've been working so hard to stay away from idiots like you." Then, the little lad glanced at him expressionlessly from the corner of his eyes, as if he was implying that Mu Linfeng was the person he was referring to. He rarely swore, but since Mu Linfeng had humiliated him, why couldn't he humiliate him back? After being insulted again and again, it wasn't his style if he didn't show them some face. Mu Linfeng's face darkened as soon as he said that. Even a ghost could tell that this brat was trying to humiliate someone with his words. How dare you? Mu Linfeng's lips twitched in anger. He glared fiercely at him, trying to intimidate this 7-year-old boy with his authority. If you dare to be rash again, I'll do you right here and now. Really? Second granduncle, do you have that much authority? Yu's pink lips curled into a gentlemanly smile. What are you going to do about me? Haha. Let's wait and see. Haha. I'll do you for the sake of the Mu family, you vile spawn. The Mu family won't allow a vile spawn like you to sully our dignity. As Mu Linfeng spoke, he waved his hand. The adjutant beside him whipped out a gun from his waist and raised his wrist. The black muzzle was instantly aimed between Yu's brows. Yu sat calmly in the car, neither shocked nor angry. Even when the cold muzzle was aimed at her forehead, she did not lose her composure. Her calm demeanor shocked Mu Linfeng even more. This child, at such a young age, had an extraordinary spirit. Vermilion Bird looked up and saw the adjutant taking out his gun. In the next second, she raised her Desert Eagle and aimed it at Mu Linfeng's forehead. The moment she raised her hand, all the soldiers around her raised their guns and aimed at her. They were on high alert. If Vermilion Bird made the slightest movement, they would be ready to shoot at any time. "Protect the chief," the adjutant shouted. The order had already been issued, and all the soldiers were on full alert. "Second granduncle, don't blame me for not reminding you of something." Yu Yu sat in the car with his eyes lowered. At this moment, the surroundings were quiet, so his tender voice sounded especially clear and powerful. "If you touch a strand of my hair, you'll be shot into a hornet's nest in the next second." After saying that coldly, Yu Yu pursed her pink lips and smiled elegantly. She narrowed her eyes and smiled innocently and adorably. "Do you want to try?" In her seemingly innocent smile, her eyes were as clear as a fawn's, but there were too many things that made people's hearts palpitate. Chapter 1368. Mu Linfeng's lips stiffened and he pursed his lips tightly. He was once a ruthless character who had been through desperate situations. Hence, when Yu Yu said those words, he subconsciously sensed a murderous aura lurking around them. It was surging in the dark and chilling. There was actually an ambush? He keenly sensed that there might still be a troop in the surroundings that was silently lurking in the dark at this moment. He suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Half of his life in the military made him realize at once that there might be a sniper ambushing them a few hundred meters away. Perhaps there was a sniper hiding in the dark, aiming at the space between his eyebrows with his sniper scope open. That was why the child had said those words so carelessly. "If you touch a strand of my hair, you'll be shot into a hornet's nest in the next second." His mind was in a mess. His nerves were all over the place. It was not because of anything else other than Yu Yu sitting in the car calmly. Even if he saw the child's tender face and innocent smile, his every move exuded extraordinary charisma. Could these people be his men? These mercenaries, which consisted of more than 10 people, were all listening to a 7-year-old child's orders? Mu Linfeng felt that his understanding had been overturned. His cold eyes swept past Vermilion Bird and sized her up before his gaze slowly landed on Yintianyo's face. This child was not ordinary. He resembled Mu Yaja when he was young, but as a son, he was more ruthless and mature than his father. He was so young, yet he already had such charisma. Apart from being shocked, he was also wary of him. He was even more certain that this child was an extremely dangerous person and must not be allowed to live. Initially, he thought that this was Mu Yaja's force. When he first saw the child sitting in the car, he thought that he was just good with his mouth. However, Mu Linfeng was half a beat slower to react, and his heart instantly froze. He came back to his senses and suddenly realized that this child was not such a simple character at all. He could not figure it out. How could he have imagined that a child could have such power? How did he do it? "Put the gun down," Vermilion Bird warned coldly. As Yu Yu's secret guard, she would not allow anyone to pose a threat to Yu Yu in front of her. She warned sternly as her gaze shot out like a sharp sword. Even the experienced adjutant could not help but be intimidated by her gaze. His hand, which was holding the gun tightly, trembled, but he still did not put it down. The Vermilion Bird didn't say another word. She suddenly stepped forward, swept her long leg, and gave a high kick. With a heavy muffled sound, she kicked his hand that was holding the gun. The gun flew out of his hand. At the same time, the soldier at the side saw her move and wanted to shoot her. Vermilion Bird's eyes, kill. Before the soldier could open fire. The atmosphere at the scene was completely tense, and the sound of loading rose and fell one after another. Vermilion Bird spun around, but in a flash, she appeared behind Mu Linfeng like a specter in the next second. She pointed the gun at the back of his head and bellowed, "Who dares to move?" The air seemed to have frozen, and everyone held their breaths. Chapter 1369. The entire process took less than 5 seconds. Vermilion Bird's movements were so nimble that it made one's scalp tingle. Fast. As fast as lightning. It made one's heart beat faster. They had already experienced Vermilion Bird's ability with just a glance. No one dared to be sure that their movements were faster than the bullets in her pistol. Hence, no one dared to make a move the moment she gave her order. Yu Yu raised a brow and shrugged innocently. She rebuked, "Everyone, be obedient. Vermilion Bird is very fierce. If anyone disobeys, the bullets won't have eyes." Mu Linfeng's face darkened further. His son's arrogance made him gnash his teeth in hatred, but he could do nothing to him in this situation. In fact, looking at the scene, Mu Linfeng's men had the advantage in numbers. There were at least a dozen cars worth of military equipment. In terms of headcount, they did not lose to Yun Tianyu. The reason why he dared not act rashly was that Yu Yu had arranged for a sniper to ambush him in the dark. Perhaps someone was aiming at the space between his eyebrows right now. With Vermilion Bird behind him, even if he had the advantage in numbers, he would not be able to gain any benefits. Mu Linfeng dared not make a move, and the situation came to a standstill. "What do you mean by this?" Mu Linfeng snorted. "Looks like you don't know your place. Do you know what will happen to you if you do this? Second uncle has a high position and a noble status." "I know it very well." Yu Yu smiled faintly. "It's just that, second uncle, you're the one who doesn't know my place, not me. Do you understand?" "What do you mean?" "Nothing." Yu Yu casually said, "I just hope that second uncle won't interfere in my affairs. I'll give you a chance now. Take your men and leave immediately. I won't hurt a single strand of your hair. However, there's one person who must stay." Mu Linfeng frowned when he heard that. Without thinking, he knew who the person Yu Yu wanted him to stay was. It seemed that this lad was here for fourth Mu, too. At that moment, he suddenly realized what Yu Yu had said. "Second granduncle, you're the one who hasn't figured out my identity, not me. Do you understand?" Did he not know who he was? Who was this child? For a moment, Mu Linfeng could not figure it out. Thinking about it again and again, he felt a chill from the bottom of his feet. However, he did not lower himself and continued to put on airs. With a cold face, he said, "I should be the one saying this to you. Have some self-awareness and retreat with your men. Then, I won't argue with you about what happened today." However, despite putting on airs, Mu Linfeng still showed a trace of weakness. Unlike his aggressive attitude earlier, he did not have much confidence in his words now. Yu Yu did not give him a way out. "You're kidding." His lips curled up mockingly, and a trace of disdain appeared on his tender little face. "If second uncle insists on interfering, why don't you give it a try? I'd like to see how you're going to take him away from me." A trace of viciousness flashed across Mu Linfeng's eyes. His face darkened and then turned green. He could neither advance nor retreat. If he really left Mu Lianjue here and left in a sorry state, not only would his dignity be tarnished, but he would also become a laughing stock in front of this young man. If he really wanted to protect and take him away, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens. Chapter 1370. It seemed that it would be more difficult than ascending to the heavens if he really wanted to protect and take her away by force. At the same time, they were in a deadlock like this. The scene before him was actually easily suppressed by a child, causing his face to heat up even more. It was very embarrassing. "Who exactly are you?" Mu Linfeng stared at him intently, his eyes as sharp as an eagle's. Yu Yu retorted calmly and elegantly, "Why should I tell you?" Mu Linfeng was stunned for a moment before he snorted. "What an arrogant attitude." Yu Yu raised a brow. "You don't have the right to ask about my identity." Mu Linfeng was even more stunned. Yu Yu said sternly, "Hand her over obediently. However, take your men and retreat. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave." With that, he raised his head. His eyes were no longer as clear as before and were now dark and gloomy. "Don't blame me for not reminding you, second granduncle. I want this person. If you stop me, you won't have a good ending." "Young man, aren't you being too arrogant with your words?" Mu Linfeng's words were clearly lacking in confidence. Yu Yu could not be bothered with him anymore. Vermilion Bird stood behind him like a stone statue, unmoving. The gun in her hand was raised, and the cold, black muzzle was aimed at him like an endless abyss. It was as if he would be mercilessly devoured if he made the slightest move. Mu Linfeng glanced at her, but from his angle, he happened to see Mercenary Paradise's epaulette on her shoulder. He was shocked. Mercenary Paradise was famous, so he had naturally heard of it. It was said that this organization was a mercenary group created by the Hurricane Group. They were a mercenary group from Mercenary Paradise and had extraordinary strength. Mu Linfeng's gaze deepened as he looked at Yu. What exactly was this child's identity? After a long silence that felt like a century, Mu Linfeng turned his face slightly and glanced sideways at Mu Lianjue, who was standing not too far away, with a hint of struggle in his eyes. Mu Lianjue turned to look at his brother as well. He could see the hesitation and struggle on his face. It was obvious that he was hesitating and was weighing the pros and cons in his heart. Second brother. Mu Lianjue's lips trembled in agitation as he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Take me with you. You can't leave me here." He wasn't afraid of death. There were some unknown things that were even more frightening and terrifying than death. He didn't know what would happen to him if he fell into Mu Yaja's hands. He didn't dare to think about it. Plus, he was unwilling to accept it. He was unwilling to lose just like that. Upon hearing his voice, Mu Linfeng frowned and felt a sense of irritation rise within him. This thing is a hindrance. Unable to accomplish anything, but good at spoiling things. It seemed that this was Fourth Mu's fate. Even if Mu Linfeng was unwilling to admit it, he did not want to throw his life away for nothing. Although he did not believe that this 7-year-old child could do anything to him, looking at the situation before him and thinking about Yu's warning in his heart, he was ultimately defeated and did not dare to gamble with his life. He was surprised that this child had such power and ability, but his heart also palpitated at the deterrence in the child's words. He did not quite believe it, but he did not dare to doubt it. Chapter 1371. Mu Linfeng sucked in a deep breath of cold air and said in an extremely pathetic voice, "Fine. I'll take my men away." "No." Mu Lianjue exclaimed the moment he finished speaking. "Second brother, do you really believe that child's words? He's just a 7-year-old child, how can he scare you?" "Second brother, he's just a child, how can you believe his words?" Mu Linfeng reprimanded, "Shut up." Mu Linfeng did not want to waste his breath on him. He was already embarrassed from retreating in such a sorry state. Now, his brother's questioning made him even more embarrassed. He had been rebuffed time and time again, especially by this 7-year-old child, who did not leave him any face at all. He no longer had any face left. Mu Lianjue's few words had completely stripped him of what little face he had left. Thus, he ordered coldly, "Retreat." The moment he said that, the soldiers at the scene withdrew their stance. Mu Linfeng turned around and walked toward the car. Mu Lianjue immediately ran toward him, blocked his path, and grabbed his shoulder. "Second brother, are you really so heartless? Are you going to leave me here just because of that child's one-sided words?" Mu Linfeng sneered and retorted, "Ha! He's just a child, why are you so flustered?" Mu Lianjue was taken aback by this unexpected slap in the face. In fact, even though he was facing a 7-year-old child, he felt an inexplicable fear from the bottom of his heart. It was just that he was unwilling to admit it. He was actually afraid of a child. He was afraid of a 7-year-old child. Mu Linfeng brushed his hand away and was about to leave. Seeing that he really did not care about him anymore, Mu Lianjue's heart twisted with hatred as a sinister and dark rage surfaced on his face. He abruptly turned around and dashed forward to grab Mu Linfeng's shoulder from behind. Following the momentum, he turned around and stuck close to him. His left hand gripped the man's throat while his right swiftly snatched the gun from Mu Linfeng's waist and pressed it against the latter's temple. In just a few seconds, he had turned the tables on the man. "Second brother, since you're so heartless, don't blame me for being ruthless." Grabbing his throat with one hand and pressing the gun against his temple with the other, Mu Lianjue bellowed malevolently, "Back off, all of you. Step back." Mu Linfeng was greatly taken aback. He did not expect that his nephew would dare to do this. Did he think that he could escape unscathed by using him as a hostage? His heart turned cold. He cursed in his heart. This heartless and unscrupulous bastard. To think that he had cared about the decades of brotherhood that he had given him advice to find a way out for him. He had even gone so far as to fall out with Wuxia. In the end, he had repaid his kindness with ingratitude. Bastard. What are you trying to do? Mu Linfeng roared in shock. Let go. Idiot. Second brother. Hee. If we're going to die, let's die together. Mu Lianjue's face turned livid as if he had gone mad. His eyes, in particular, were bloodshot. His voice was as shrill as a malicious spirit's. Chapter 1372. The scene went out of control once more. No one had expected things to develop in this direction. After a moment of stunned silence, the crowd went on alert and aimed their guns at Mu Lianjue. His lips curled into a bloodthirsty smirk as he tightened his grip on Mu Linfeng's throat. His knuckles tightened as he pressed the gun muzzle against the latter's temple. He was ready to fire. Tell them to put down their guns. He threatened. Mu Linfeng remained silent. His face was flushed red from suffocation, but even so, his lips remained tightly pursed and he did not loosen his grip. You really think I won't dare to kill you, don't you? Mu Lianjue's voice grew colder. At most, I'll drag you down to hell with me if I die. Tell them to put down their guns, do you hear me? Do you hear me? Mu Si, are you crazy? Are you? Mu Linfeng spat out a few words with difficulty as he glared at him with bloodshot eyes. Like an enraged beast, he flew into a rage. Mu Lianjue sneered. Second Mu, cut the crap. I told you to order them to put away their guns, do you hear me? I don't have the patience, tell them to put away their guns. Put away their guns. As he spoke, he tightened his grip on Mu Linfeng's throat and exerted more force with his fingers, as if he wanted to stab the latter's throat. Mu Linfeng grunted in pain and struggled for a while before raising his voice. Put away your guns. The moment he gave the order, his subordinates exchanged glances. However, no one dared to disobey Mu Linfeng's orders. Thus, they all put away their guns. Give me a car. Mu Lianjue issued a second order, but this time, he was like a trapped beast on the verge of death. Mu Linfeng gritted his teeth, angry at his cowardice, but more than that, he hated himself for having misjudged him. Yu burst into laughter when she saw this scene. It was rare to see a dog-eat-dog scene. Today, however, he had seen what a real dog-eat-dog fight was. The flood rushed against the Dragon King's temple, and they were fighting against each other. Had Mu Lianjue lost his mind? Did he think that he could escape unscathed just like this? Dream on. Just as Yu was about to open the door and get out of the car, Lisa suddenly grabbed his hand and shook her head at him. Danger. She spat out 2 words. Yu smiled and said calmly, what's there to be afraid of? You'll protect me. While Lisa was still in a daze, Yu had already pushed open the door and stepped out of the car. The scene fell into a stalemate, and the air froze. Mu Lianjue held Mu Linfeng hostage as he yelled, give me a car. Did you hear that? Prepare the car for me. Just as he finished speaking, he caught a glimpse of Yu getting out of the car from the corner of his eye. He stepped on the ground and stood up straight. Then, a snow-white and adorable face appeared in front of him. With his hands behind his back, Yu stood obediently before him like an elegant gentleman. He cocked his head and smiled innocently. Fourth granduncle, we've just met and you're already in a hurry to leave. Don't you want to sit down and have a cup of tea? His voice was immature and tender, and at the same time, it was still childish. However, his tender voice revealed a strand of coldness that caused one's hair to stand on end, and it froze one's heart. Chapter 1373. Mu Lianjue snorted. His eyes narrowed dangerously as he met Yu's gaze. His face, however, was as cold as a snake's. Don't call me fourth granduncle, he said in disgust and then sneered. The plan failed this time because I was careless. The blunder of the whole plan was that I didn't expect Mu Yaja to have trained two capable sons. If I had known, I wouldn't have ended up in this state. Mu Linfeng, who was being held in his hands, kept struggling. Seeing him struggle, Mu Lianjue bellowed, "Behave yourself. Don't move. I'm warning you, I don't have the patience to pester you now. If you don't behave yourself, don't blame me for not giving you face. What you've done now shows that you don't give me any face at all," said Mu Linfeng hatefully. Mu Lianjue laughed sinisterly when he heard that. "Blame me? You're the one who didn't care about your brotherly ties. You actually insisted on leaving me here just now. Why? Second brother, you're actually afraid of a child? How many people will laugh at you if this gets out? The second head of the Mu family is actually intimidated by a 7-year-old child. I think you've lived half your life in vain. Shut up." Mu Linfeng said angrily, "Fourth Mu, this is a sin you created, you should bear it yourself. What do you mean by I didn't care about my brotherly ties? You're the one with a heart of stone. It's you who murdered Liancheng. It's you who harmed Ishan. It's also you who poisoned the old man's medicine. You're the one who did all these treacherous deeds. You're the one who's truly heartless. To think that I thought that you and I were born from the same roots and are connected by blood, in the end, you're actually accusing me. Fourth Mu, you're too disappointing. Are you blaming me for this?" Mu Lianjue lost control of himself and shouted, "Second brother, are you blaming me for this? Back then, if you hadn't colluded with the elders to support Mu Yaja, would I have ended up in this state? You wouldn't have ended up in this state. You're regretting it now, aren't you? Hee hee." The organization that he had painstakingly nurtured turned against him in the end. The chess pieces that you had painstakingly set up, the chess pieces that you had painstakingly nurtured, and what happened in the end? This pawn doesn't listen to you at all. All of this, this vast Mu family empire, should have belonged to me. Originally, all of this could have changed for the better. In my hands, the Mu group will become even more powerful and majestic. However, you actually supported a chess piece to rise to the top. Haha. Mu heir, it seems that this is also your ambition. You want to use Mu Yaja as a puppet to take over the vast territory of the Mu clan. The more Mu Lianjue spoke, the darker Mu Linfeng's face became. He bellowed, "Shut up." What? Was he angry out of humiliation? Hee hee. What I said is the truth. In terms of ambition, how can I compare to you? Mu Lianjue narrowed his eyes, his voice sinister. His voice was incomparably cold, revealing a bone-chilling hatred. If it weren't for your foolishness, I wouldn't have ended up in this state. Second Mu, if I must die here tonight, then all of you will have to die with me. How foolish. Fourth Mu, you're really too disappointing. Mu Linfeng shook his head and sighed, his face full of disappointment. Chapter 1374. Mu Linfeng only found it laughable. His lips twitched for a while before he said coldly, "I only know one thing, the evils committed by the heavens can be defied. The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear. Do you think that you can completely shirk your responsibility by saying this? Or do you think that I'll let you off just because you said this? Wishful thinking." Mu Lianjue laughed sinisterly. At this moment, he was already in a state of madness. Mu Linfeng felt a chill in his heart. The evening wind kept blowing a bleak chill, but it could not overcome the coldness in his heart. His lips curled up as the mockery in his eyes turned into helplessness. He let out a long sigh, helplessness appearing on his weathered and battered face. Fourth Mu. As your elder brother, I only have one piece of advice for you: stop it while it's still early. What you're doing is meaningless. You shouldn't have done that back then, either. Do you know that what you did was akin to patricide? It's treason. All the more you shouldn't have done it now. I don't want to hear all this from you, what's the point? Mu Lianjue's eyes reddened. The position of the Mu family's head was supposed to be mine. It was mine. Do you know how long I've worked to become the Mu family's head? Do you know how hard I've been living for the past few decades? That old fart, however, negated all my hard work and effort with just a few words. Then, what's the point of all my hard work all these years? What about you? You actually supported Wuxia to become the head. Was I not even comparable to a 20-year-old kid back then? You're gravely mistaken about that. You're merely gauging the heart of a gentleman with a cautious heart. Mu Linfeng paused, his face twitching a few times before he continued. I admit that I did neglect your feelings when I nurtured Yaxia and supported him to become the head of the family. You're also right about part of the reason why I nurtured him to become my power. My motives were indeed impure and selfish. However, it's definitely not what you said. At that time, the Mu family's power was changing, and I wanted to stabilize it. That's why I chose this child. In fact, in my eyes, Yaxia was an outstanding child. Facts have proven that I wasn't wrong. This child is indeed very outstanding, better than you. There's no doubt about that. Thus, even now that he's gone against my wishes, I don't regret standing up for him and supporting him. As you can see, the Mu group has been growing stronger and stronger in his hands. The changes in the Mu group were obvious to all. Back then, if it weren't for him, the Mu group wouldn't have been able to survive that crisis unscathed. My heart is with Mu group, and Mu group is the most important. Perhaps, to you, these words may sound a bit pompous, but they are my true thoughts. If the Mu group can become a core business empire in his hands, I will have fulfilled my wish in this life. Mu Lianjue's eyes narrowed in anger as the corners of his lips twitched. His face looked especially hideous as his eyes slowly coiled around his neck like a venomous snake. What a great idea. Mu heir, if you say you have no selfish motives, who would believe you? You don't have to say such high-sounding words here. Chapter 1375. No matter what you do now, there's no turning back. It's time for you to pay back your sins. He. I know that I've been utterly defeated. Yes, I've failed. Still, do you think I'll let you off just because you said this? There was a hint of hysteria and madness in his smile as if he had been possessed by a demon. Even if I'm going to die here tonight, you'll die with me and be buried with me. This was his character. Even if he was destroyed, he would drag others down to hell with him. At the very least, it would not be a loss if he dragged Mu Linfeng down with him. If he could drag Yun Tianyu down with him, then this deal would be worth it. Mu Lianjue opened his bloodshot eyes and stared fixedly at Yu Yu, who was standing in front of him, with a sinister smile. Yu Yu, who was standing in front of him with his hands behind his back, was as elegant as a little gentleman. He had a delicate and handsome face and was as adorable as snow. His features were extremely similar to Yun Shishir's and, similarly, Mu Yaja's charm. This child was Yun Shishir's true love and Mu Yaja's most beloved son. Since Mu Yaja wanted to destroy him, he would not let him off either. If he wanted to die, he would not let Mu Yaja have an easy time either. At the thought of this, his lips trembled, and a hard object could be vaguely seen squirming under his lips. Suddenly, he hooked his tongue and bit on a remote control device in his mouth. A maniacal hatred flashed across his eyes. Yu Yu was startled by his sudden action. He furrowed his brows in puzzlement. However, when he saw the remote control device between his lips, his heart skipped a beat and his face froze. What was that? It was a small remote control device. It was pocket-sized, yet he had been holding it in his mouth all this time. What is this? He questioned in a low voice, full of wariness. He. Yun Tianyu, you're so smart, you should be able to guess what this is, right? Mu Lianjue's eyes were bloodshot as he held the remote in his hand. Come here and I'll tell you what this is. Yu Yu frowned and said coldly, why should I go there? Mu Lianjue smiled sinisterly and spat, of course. If I press this button, you will lose your dear mommy and brother forever. Yu Yu was stunned. Her face turned pale and she asked in disbelief, what did you say? What? You don't believe me? Mu Lianjue's eyes were filled with mockery as he gripped the remote control tightly in his hand. His face was full of viciousness as he bellowed hysterically, "Hee hee. I have already sent someone to plant an explosive device in your house. If I press this button, there will be a bang. Hee hee. Take a guess, what will become of your gentle mommy and adorable brother?" He sneered as he enjoyed the sight of Yuntianyo's face, which was constantly changing color. He smugly said, "With one explosion, they'll be brutally blasted into a bloody mess. Their heads will be separated from their bodies, and they'll die without a burial place." Yu Yu's face turned ghastly white in an instant. Mu Linfeng's eyes were filled with disbelief when he heard this. He was crazy. This person was completely deranged. Mu Lianjue was crazy. How could he do such a crazy thing? Chapter 1376. Vermilion Bird sized up Mu Lianjue's sinister expression and hurried to Yu Yu's side. Squatting down, she whispered into his ear, "Director Yun, calm down. Don't believe him so easily. This man might be trying to trick you." She told him all the worries in her heart. She did not know what he was holding in his hand either. Could that button really be a remote control device for the explosion? No one knew, and no one knew the truth. Perhaps what he said was true. As long as he pressed the button, his home would instantly explode into a sea of fire with an earth-shattering explosion. Yun Shishir and Mu Yichen would also be mercilessly reduced to ashes, their flesh and blood splattering everywhere. Perhaps his words were just to trick him. There was no explosive device or remote control device. His goal was to trick him into using him as a hostage. He knew very well that the person who wanted his life this time was Mu Yaja. To Mu Yaja, Yun Tianyu was more valuable as a hostage than Mu Linfeng. "Director Yun, calm down. Don't be nervous. Perhaps he's just saying that to trick you." Yu Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air and said in a low voice, "I suspect so, too." He was so smart, how could he not have thought of this? His concern made him confused. Mu Lianjue was making use of this opportunity. As the saying went, all was fair in war. The man might be using an illusion to confuse him to achieve his goal. Alas, he did not dare to do so. He did not dare to gamble with Yun Shishir and Mu Yichen's lives. No one dared to guarantee, nor was anyone clear, what the hell was the button he was holding tightly in his hand at this moment. Perhaps nothing would happen if he pressed it. Perhaps, as he said, he would really lose his mother and brother forever if he pressed it. Yu Yu had always been bold and unconventional, but at this moment, he had really lost his courage. It was very difficult for him to gamble with Yun Shishir and Mu Yichen's lives. Even so, despite his anxiety, he maintained a calm expression as he scrutinized the man unblinkingly. His face showed no signs of wavering as he carefully scrutinized the man, trying hard to find any suspicious signs on his face. "What? You don't believe me? Do you really think I'm coaxing you? If you don't believe me, why don't you give it a try?" Mu Lianjue said as he raised the control button in his hand and pretended to press it. Yu Yu finally could not hold himself back and raised his voice to stop him. "Wait." Mu Lianjue's lips curled into a triumphant smirk the moment he said that. "Then, come over here. Be good and come to me." Mu Lianjue was like an evil demon as he patiently enticed him. "Come here, good boy, come to me." Yu Yu pursed his lips tightly. He had just taken a step forward when Lisa suddenly blocked his path. "He's lying to you." Lisa lowered her voice and stared at him with a pair of cold eyes. Her face was alarmed. "Don't go over. Move aside." Yu Yu smiled elegantly. "Lisa, move aside. I can't let you take the risk." Lisa's tone was stiff, but she had no intention of giving in. She couldn't just watch him throw his life away. Chapter 1377. Who knew what earth-shattering things he would do in a fit of hysteria? Likewise, I don't dare to take the risk. I can't let mommy and big brother be in danger. Yu Yu paused and looked at her. "Don't worry, you're on standby at any time. I know what to do." "No." Lisa was adamant to the end. She was certain that the so-called explosive device in the man's hand was just an empty shell that did not work at all. It was just a last-ditch effort. He was making use of Yu Yu's weakness. He knew that the child was eager to protect his mother and would not watch her fall into danger. Yu Yu calmly asked, then, what if it's real? What if it was really an explosive device if he pressed it? Lisa choked all of a sudden. Vermilion Bird's eyes flickered as she whispered in his ear, "Sir, we have a sniper 100 meters away on standby." It's too late. Yu Yu knitted his brows. The sniper crouched 100 meters away on standby. However, he would not act rashly if he did not receive the order to shoot. If he were to give the order now, it would only alert the enemy. If Mu Lianjue wanted to kill him before he could press the button with the intention of perishing together, there would be an accident. He could not condone even a 1 in a million accident. "I'll give you 3 seconds. He gave his ultimatum and started counting down. 1, Master, Lisa did not back down. Yu Yu stared into her eyes and said word by word, "Get out of my way." 2, Lisa fiercely bit her lips, and then suddenly rubbed her messy forehead, and unwillingly moved out of the way. 3, Mu Lianjue raised the button in his hand high in the air. Yu Yu suddenly raised his voice. "Fourth great uncle, let's negotiate." "I don't have the patience to negotiate with you," he said coldly. Yu Yu smiled. "Fourth great uncle, I'm willing to be your hostage now, but don't you dare play any tricks. Otherwise, I don't have the patience, either." The man pondered for a moment and then smiled sinisterly. "Fine. I'm warning you, though, don't play any tricks. Otherwise, we'll just perish together." Yu Yu smiled. "With your words, how can I dare to play any tricks?" After saying that, he raised his arrogant chin and walked towards him. Mu Lianjue looked at him greedily as if he was a malicious spirit standing at the mouth of purgatory and showing his ugly face. Mu Linfeng's face's expression, bees. How could this child have such extraordinary courage? In order to protect his beloved family, he actually didn't hesitate to put himself in danger. Putting everything else aside, just this point alone made him admire him from the bottom of his heart. To be simple. It seemed that he had still underestimated this child. While he was still in a daze, Yu Yu walked up to Mu Lianjue. The latter grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to his side. At the same time, he kicked Mu Linfeng out. Caught off guard, Mu Linfeng fell to the ground in a wretched state, landing on his face like a dog in the mud. Mu Lianjue grabbed Yu Yu's throat with one hand. In an instant, all the members of Mercenary Paradise were on alert. They stared at Mu Lianjue vigilantly and were on standby at any time. Chapter 1378. Even Mu Linfeng felt ashamed of himself when he saw her composed expression. "Aren't you afraid?" Mu Lianjue narrowed his eyes and gripped his neck hard. Yu Yu's body was curvaceous, and his neck, in particular, was as elegant and charming as a swan. Such a beautiful neck, it should be a heart-wrenching thing to break, right? He said viciously, "As long as I exert more strength, he. You won't be able to keep your life. Are you really not afraid? You can try." Yu Yu smiled elegantly, completely unfazed by his threat. "I want to live, and so do you. What value do I have to you if I die?" Mu Lianjue cocked a brow and sneered, his eyes turning more ruthless. "You're right. You're a smart child. However, if anything happens to me tonight, you won't be able to leave this place alive, either. Fourth granduncle, since I'm in your hands now, you should get rid of that device in your hand. Don't be an eyesore." Yu Yu sneered, his face full of disgust. As soon as he said that, Mu Lianjue's eyes darkened. He raised the small device in his hand and smashed it to the ground, shattering it into pieces. Yu Yu's eyes darkened. He was startled for a moment, but in the next moment, a look of understanding flashed across his eyes. It seemed that, as he had expected, the device in Mu Lianjue's hand was just a smokescreen to lure him. It was useless. What explosive device? It was just nonsense. Vermilion Bird stood at the side and watched as Mu Lianjue smashed the device to the ground. She heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that it was just a useless component. It was a false alarm. Yu Yu was relieved, too. The rock in his heart finally fell to the ground. His face remained expressionless as he stared at the device he had smashed to pieces on the ground. Behind him, Mu Lianjue shouted smugly, "Hee hee. This is just a simple mechanical device, it's useless. It's just a toy to scare a child, how could you believe it? I thought that a 7-year-old child could be smart, but it seems that this is all there is to it." Vermilion Bird choked when she heard that. She tried her best to stifle her laughter and pursed her lips, pretending to be cool. Lisa, who was standing at the side, looked even colder and more disdainful. Yu Yu's eyes shone brightly. "Is that so? Fourth granduncle, you lied to me that it's an explosive device, and I really believed it. How naughty. To lie to a child's face, Hee hee." Mu Lianjue's smile was tinged with pleasure as he gripped the boy's neck. He unscrupulously enjoyed the latter's feigned weakness and helplessness. His wrinkled fingers traced the boy's cheeks before he grabbed the gun and pressed the muzzle against the latter's temple. His gaze was sinister and vicious. T. NN. Hee hee. Yu Yu sneered inwardly. He was not afraid of tigers, but he was not a calf, he was the king of beasts. Chapter 1379. Fourth granduncle, you adults are so bad. How could you bully a child? How pitiful that I actually believed you. Now that I'm in your hands, I'm so angry. He mewed like a little lamb and complained aggrievedly. For some reason, Yu Yu's words made Vermilion Bird's hair stand on end. Yu Yu was so scary. He was clearly the worst and most scheming one. On the surface, he was being held hostage and controlled by Mu Lianjue, but what about it? Yu Yu looked weak on the surface, but in reality, he had sharp claws and fangs hidden behind his back. Poor Mu Lianjue. Did he really think that he had the upper hand in this situation? Yun Tianyu merely took pity on him and wanted to play along with him. When he confirmed that the device was just an ordinary one, he secretly made a hand gesture to it. Vermilion Bird secretly sent out a signal, but it was still unable to kill the man on the spot. The situation was in a stalemate because he had a gun in his hand. Vermilion Bird planned to stall for time and kill the man the moment he let his guard down. Mu Lianjue was completely unaware of Yu Yu's scheme and the situation he was in. He was still extremely pleased with himself. Hee hee. A child is indeed a child. You actually believed me with just a few words. Still, you're really bold to barge into the tiger's den. Fourth granduncle, do you dare to kill me? Yu Yu smiled provocatively as his eyes turned cold. Do you dare to hurt a single strand of my hair? Why not? Mu Lianjue pinched his cheeks viciously. You can't die yet, though. I'll spare your life before you cover my escape. Fourth granduncle, let me give you a piece of advice, don't struggle anymore. You've lost, accept your fate. Yu Yu gave him an ultimatum out of pity. Just as he said that, not far away, 2 dazzling lights suddenly appeared. They were slowly approaching the southern entrance. Everyone present was on high alert. Vermilion Bird followed the light and saw an Audi A8 approaching from afar. She especially noticed that this car had a J background license plate. Presumably, its origin was not simple. Behind the Audi A8, there were several other cars. The Audi A8 stopped steadily at the south entrance. Everyone looked over. In his line of sight, a tall and slender figure slowly stepped out of the car. Mu Lianjue stepped out of the car and stood tall and straight. His body was tall and slender. Invisibly, an awe-inspiring aura spread out in an instant. His body exuded a very terrifying aura. This kind of aura was enough to make anyone feel fear. When Yu Yu saw him, she was confused at first. She did not understand why he was here. When Mu Lianjue saw Yu Yu, he was stunned. He did not expect to see such a strange situation when he rushed over. Why was he here? Both father and son had the same question almost at the same time. "Daddy, why are you here?" Yu Yu was the first to ask with a look of astonishment. Just as he opened his mouth, Mu Lianjue grabbed him by the throat and roared, "Shut up!" Mu Yaja's arrival made him raise his guard. Yu Yu could not hide his shock despite being choked. Chapter 1380. He cursed inwardly in his heart and connected the dots. A white light flashed in his mind, and he suddenly suspected that Vice Captain Zhou's mercenary group had been sent by Daddy. If that was the case, did it not mean that he had made a huge mistake? He thought that Mu Lianjue was about to be smuggled out of the country, so he rushed over to kidnap him. He did not expect that the father and son would bump into each other. Mu Yaja, who had obviously guessed this, was slightly taken aback. He was indeed his son, he actually thought of the same thing as him. Vermilion Bird broke out in cold sweat as well. What was going on? It turned out that the vice captain was Mu Yaja's men. They had been busy all day, but they did not expect him to be one of them. Vermilion Bird could not help glancing at the vice captain. The latter also reacted and looked at him pitifully. There was a hint of sympathy in their eyes. It turned out that he was one of them. Yu Yu's face darkened for a moment. "Daddy, what a coincidence." Mu Yaja glanced at Vermilion Bird and then at the calm Yu Yu. At first, he was a little alarmed. After all, the sight of Yu Yu with a gun pointed at his son's temple was a little nerve-wracking. However, when he caught a glimpse of Yu Yu's sinister smile and the calm Vermilion Bird, he knew that this was Yu Yu's wicked game. Thus, he heaved a sigh of relief. He smiled and could not help but tease, "My good son, it's already so late. What are you doing here instead of sleeping at home?" Yu Yu replied innocently, "I want to help Daddy catch the bad guys." Mu Yaja was delighted by his son's reply. "My good son is so filial." Of course. It's only right for a son to be filial to his father. Yu Yu said matter-of-factly. Mu Lianjue's face darkened. The father-son pair was echoing each other, clearly ignoring his deterrence. "Shut up, all of you. Do you think this is child's play?" Mu Lianjue found the scene before him very strange. The father and son teased each other without a trace of nervousness. Yu Yu did not look afraid at all. The gun was still pointed at his forehead. Was he not afraid? Was he not afraid of death, or was he not afraid of being shot? Even if he wasn't afraid of him shooting, wasn't he afraid that the gun would go off accidentally? Please. Yu Yu was clearly his hostage, but why did he feel like he was the trapped beast? Can't you be more serious? He was the one who kidnapped Yu Yu. Why did he feel like he was in deep trouble? Mu Linfeng was also confused. The conversation between the father and son was too relaxed and leisurely, so much so that there wasn't even the slightest sense of danger in the current situation. "Shut up." Mu Lianjue could not take it anymore. "Are you done? Prepare a car for me. Get the car ready." Yu Yu looked up with a smile and said considerately, "I'll prepare a hearse for you. Do you want it?" Mu Lianjue was flabbergasted. "Fourth uncle, have you had enough? Let me go if you're done. I want to go home and sleep, I'm so sleepy." Yu Yu even yawned sleepily after saying that. "Are you really not afraid of death?" Mu Lianjue quickly loaded the gun, put his finger on the trigger, and pointed it at his temple. "Do you believe that I won't shoot your head off right now?" Mu Lianjue had just raised his hand when a bullet pierced through the air from a distance with a swoosh, piercing through his wrist. Mu Linfeng was stunned. "Ah!" Chapter 1381. Mu Lianjue let out a muffled groan. The bullet came from a long-range sniper rifle 100 meters away. Despite the distance, the bullet's lethality was shocking. When it pierced through his wrist, it caused explosive damage and caused his palm to burst open. Fresh blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Yu Yu only felt a loud explosion above his head. After a buzzing sound, he temporarily lost his hearing. Mu Lianjue could only feel the bullet penetrating his wrist. Along with the excruciating pain of broken bones, his arm went numb and he lost all feeling in it. His grip loosened, and the pistol in his hand fell to the ground. Vermilion Bird strode forward and kicked the pistol several meters away with the tip of her foot. She then carried Yu and brought him to safety. Whoosh! Another sound of a bullet piercing through the air was heard. Mu Lianjue's abdomen was mercilessly penetrated by a bullet once more. At this moment, he was practically surrounded by the long-range snipers. A total of 5 snipers were aiming at him. If he made the slightest move that was detrimental to Yu, he would be shot on the spot. Mu Lianjue groaned in pain. At that moment, he felt as if his entire body had lost its temperature. An uncontrollable chill rose from the soles of his feet, swept across his spine, and attacked his heart. It was so cold that it made one's heart numb. There seemed to be a huge force exploding in the depths of his flesh and blood where the bullet had penetrated his abdomen. At first, he only felt numbness, a hollow numbness. Soon after, he felt an intense burning sensation around his wound. Then, he felt an endless cycle of radioactive pain. The burning sensation hit his heart directly, as if he was being set ablaze in a vast expanse of land. Following that, something sticky and viscous flowed out from the wound and stained his clothes like a blooming flower. Mu Lianjue's eyes widened in disbelief. Everything happened so suddenly that he was not prepared for it at all. He only felt that the world before him had turned dark. He first wiped his wound with his hand. When he raised his hand, his palm was already red. Was it blood? He didn't hear any gunshots at all. He only felt the sound of air being sliced through from behind him. Then, he was shot. Could it be that there was a sniper lying in ambush in the distance? Mu Lianjue was stunned. For a moment, he was jittery and paranoid. He abruptly turned around and tightly clutched his bleeding wound. His eyes were completely red, as if they were about to burst. However, when he saw the cold expression on Mu Yaja's face and Yu's smile, he suddenly understood everything. As it turned out, he had nowhere to run. As it turned out, he was being played like a monkey. This brat had clearly calculated everything. Just now, he had displayed such a cowardly appearance in front of him. He was simply playing the fool in front of him. Bastard! Bastard! Mu Lianjue cursed in anger. B*****. I was actually tricked by you, you bastard. Yu looked at him coldly, then smiled deeply and said elegantly, "Fourth uncle, you're stupid. With your skills, I don't even want to play with you. How boring." With that, he nonchalantly opened his palm with a cold face. Vermilion Bird, give it to me. Chapter 1382. Yu held the gun that Vermilion Bird had passed to him. It was a Desert Eagle. The gun's body was a little heavy, but one should not underestimate it. The Desert Eagle was powerful to begin with. This pistol used high-quality ammunition, and the bullets had explosive power. He fiddled with it for a while. Previously, he had Vermilion Bird teach him some marksmanship. It was not because of anything else, but because, after the recent series of events, he knew that he had to learn some self-protection methods. This was his character. He did not like to rely on others for everything. He was too weak. If not for Xiao Yichen and Lisa's protection, it would be difficult for him to protect himself. Hence, he had to learn how to protect himself and master the means to do so. In the past 2 days, he had been working hard to learn marksmanship from Vermilion Bird. Vermilion Bird was surprised to find that he was quite talented in marksmanship. He grasped it very quickly and learned how to load and shoot. Although his accuracy was not precise, it was still very high, which surprised her. Mu Yaja watched him pick up the gun and load it skillfully. Then, he raised his wrist and aimed the black muzzle at Mu Lianjue. Be it the way he held the gun or his posture, everything was very professional. This little guy secretly learned how to shoot behind his back. While Mu Yaja was surprised, he also felt impressed. Seeing him take out a gun, Mu Lianjue's face turned pale and his lips trembled violently. What are you doing? I've learned some marksmanship some time ago. What's more frustrating is that there's no one to practice with me, though. With that, Yu's lips curled up. Fourth granduncle, can you practice with me? No. No, his face turned pale as he turned around abruptly and tried to run away. Without another word, Yu pulled the trigger and fired 2 shots at his hind legs. Mu Lianjue let out a blood-curdling scream as he staggered to the ground. His shrill scream pierced the silence of the night and spread far and wide along the southern entrance of the vast highway. However, it soon dissipated into the biting cold wind. These 2 shots are for Uncle Zhao. If not for Mu Lianjue's assassins, Uncle Zhao would not have died that day. This was Mu Lianjue's evil debt. He had to avenge the Zhao clan. With that, Yu fired again. 2 more shots rang out. Mu Lianjue let out another blood-curdling scream as he clutched his wounded knee in pain. His whole body twitched violently as he rolled around on the ground in pain. Mu Yaja glanced at his son. At this moment, Yu was standing in the bone-chilling night breeze. His back was straight and his entire body was cold. He turned sideways. His black hair was slightly messy in the evening breeze, brushing against his cheeks and intertwining with his thick eyelashes. Her originally snow-white and cute face was incomparably deep. Her pair of gloomy and dark eyes seemed to be covered in ice and snow, without any warmth. His marksmanship was standard. When he fired, his face was cold and emotionless, as if it were just a routine. Even when he heard Mu Lianjue's screams, he did not move at all. He blinked as if he was already numb to death. He appeared so callous. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. In fact, he was not so willing to let Yu come into contact with such dark things too early. Chapter 1383. However, perhaps because he had experienced too many frightening things, Mu Yaja felt that it was time for him to come into contact with these things. Back then, when he arranged for Xiao Yichen to be sent to the army for training, he was met with opposition. However, he still threw the little fellow into the special training camp without hesitation, just so that he could strengthen his physique to a greater extent and train him. Now, Xiao Yichen proved that his choice back then was not wrong. This world had always been one where the strong preyed on the weak and the weak were eliminated. The strong were the only ones who had the right to set the rules of this world. Although the child was young, as his son, perhaps it was not a bad thing for him to come into contact with this side of things early on. Just like Xiao Yichen, even though his childhood was not accompanied by pain and suffering like other children, reality had proven that he had already become a strong person. Yu fired again. Bang! Bang! 2 shots landed on one of Mu Lianjue's legs. Blood splattered and shattered. Mu Lianjue, however, was in so much pain that he was almost numb. He did not even have the strength to cry out in pain. His body convulsed and he groaned a few times. He almost blacked out and fainted. Yu's pair of clear and bright eyes were now dyed red with hatred. When he thought of the suffering this man had caused his mommy and Xiao Yichen, he could not wait to crush him. He walked over, aimed at Mu Lianjue's waist, and fired another shot. This time, blood splattered on his face. A trace of heat was on his cheeks, but he did not seem to feel it. His handsome eyes narrowed as he coldly pursed his lips. Mu Lianjue had been shot several times. As he continued to bleed, his body temperature became colder and colder. Right now, he was hoping that Yu would give him a quick and painless death. However, Yu clearly did not want to give him a quick death with one shot. Instead, he deliberately inflicted the greatest pain on him. Thus, he mercilessly shot at the non-fatal parts of his body. He looked more like he was venting the resentment in his heart. Yu lowered his gaze with a murderous look. Those bullets landed squarely on Mu Lianjue's body. It was so painful that his entire body was almost numb. His mind buzzed and he kept losing blood. On one hand, his body felt cold because of the loss of body temperature. On the other hand, his wounds were scalded by the many bullets, and the burning pain was transmitted. Ice and fire. Bang! 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 Yu fired another 8 shots consecutively, but each bullet perfectly avoided the man's vitals. Mu Lianjue endured the pain, feeling as though he was better off dead than alive. This was the first time he had seen such a terrifying child. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with hatred. He was shot many times, but none of the bullets were fatal. For a while, he was struggling at death's door, which made him wish he was dead. You. Mu Lianjue opened his mouth in a pleading tone. You. Instead of being tormented by him like this, he might as well die a quick death. Fourth granduncle, I haven't had my fill yet. How can I let you die like this? Yu Yu's tone was languid and nonchalant. After saying that, he lifted his leg and stomped on the wound on his abdomen. Blood gushed out from the wound the moment he stomped on it. Ugh. Chapter 1384. Ugh, Mu Lianjue groaned in pain. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper. He rolled on the ground for a while and let out a heart-wrenching shrill cry of pain. After being trampled on by Chen Shi, he was already on the verge of death. However, this stomp of Chen Shi's foot caused him to simply suffer a fate worse than death. The back of his head fiercely knocked against the ground, and his desire to seek death had never been stronger. He had never thought that there would be a day when living would be more painful than dying. Yu Yu shot his hand that was covering his wound. This is for my brother. Although Mu Yichen's injuries were not caused by him, it was still his doing. Bang! I'm returning it to you on behalf of my mommy. His mommy had fallen into his hands, been humiliated, and tortured. How could a bullet be enough to pay off all the pain she had suffered at his hands? Yu Yu narrowed his eyes, which were sharp and piercing. Bang! Yu Yu's eyes widened after he finished firing the gun, and he coldly enunciated each word. This is for my daddy. Mu Lianjue coughed out a mouthful of blood as his whole body convulsed violently. Mu Yaja was stunned at first. Then, he felt warmth in his heart. His son was taking revenge for him. While Mu Yaja felt warmth in his heart, he was also touched by Yu Yu's warm heart, which was hidden under his cold exterior. All along, Yu Yu had been Yun Shusher's little warm man and little god. However, he was so arrogant. For a long time, even though he was the little god of warmth, he only cared about Yun Shusher alone and silently protected his mommy. Now, Mu Yaja had entered his heart. All along, Yu Yu had only acknowledged one family member in his heart, and that was Yun Shusher. Other than that, be it Li Qin, Yun Na, or even Yun Yecheng, who had always treated Yun Shusher as his own, were just passers-by. In his heart, his mommy was number one. Mommy was the most important and special person in his heart. There was no one else like her. For as long as he could remember, he and his mommy had depended on each other. She was his lifeblood. Perhaps, this unique feeling of the little lad was hard to understand in the eyes of outsiders. However, for the past 7 years, Yun Shusher held a special place in his heart not only because blood was thicker than water, but also because they had relied on each other for so many years. However, as his biological father, Mu Yaja, almost like a god, had descended from the heavens and appeared before him without any warning. Without any warning, he went from being a child of a single-parent family to having a father. However, he rejected this daddy. He resisted and kept him at a distance of 1,000 miles away. At first, he was unwilling to admit that he had a father. So what if she was his biological child? Mommy was the only one he loved. However, as they got along, the father and son's feelings gradually merged. Mu Yaja appreciated this son of his, and Yu Yu gradually accepted him, acknowledged him, and acknowledged him. Until now, he had acknowledged him. Those who bullied his mommy were unforgivable and deserved to die. Similarly, those who bullied his daddy were equally unforgivable. Chapter 1385. He was used to being cold and arrogant in front of Mu Yaja, but in reality, he had long acknowledged him as his daddy. On the one hand, it was because he loved his daddy. On the other hand, it was because Mu Yaja was outstanding enough to gain his approval. Mu Yaja only felt as if his heart had been ruthlessly punched, instantly tearing a hole in it. A warm current gushed in, and even though he was standing in the cold wind, he did not feel cold at all. Instead, his whole body felt warm and cozy. Yu Yu snorted. Looking at the man's miserable appearance, he smiled faintly. Fourth granduncle, there are still 2 more shots. Can you hold on? There are still 2 more shots. They're for my grandparents whom I've never met before. With that, Yu Yu fired 2 more shots at the man's chest. They were less than an inch away from his heart. Mu Lianjue fainted completely and lost consciousness. The scene instantly became deathly silent. Besides the whistling of the cold wind, everyone was deathly silent. Mu Linfeng, in particular, was as stiff as a rock. He had long been stunned. Yu Yu maintained his gun-wielding posture. His face paled for a moment before his vision regained its focus. However, when his gaze landed on the man lying limp on the ground and covered in blood, he realized with a start what he had just done. He had killed someone, he had shot and killed someone. For the first time in his life, his hands were stained with filthy blood. However, deep down, he knew that once stained with such filth, it would be difficult to wash it clean. Yu Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air. After a long time, he quietly lowered his arm. His wrist loosened, and the gun in his hand fell to the ground with a loud thud. Mu Yaja walked over and hugged him in his arms. He gently placed his large palm on the boy's cold face, only to see that the boy's face had turned ghastly pale. Just now, in the midst of extreme passion, he was completely unaware of the significance of what he had done. However, when he suddenly reacted from his hatred, he actually felt a bone-chilling coldness. "Baby, what's wrong?" Mu Yaja hugged him with some heartache, his slender fingers tenderly caressing the side of his face. He should have stopped him just now. She had to stop him when he lost his mind. However, even he was shocked by Yu Yu's cold expression and could not recover from his shock. Yu Yu turned around and said calmly, "I killed someone." His tone was calm, but it was more like he was stating an ordinary matter. Vermilion Bird walked to the man's side and squatted down to check his breathing. Her fingertips came in contact with a faint breath. It was very weak, but there was still a trace of breathing. Vermilion Bird raised his eyes and said, "Still alive. Kill him." Yun Tianyu expressionlessly replied, "Since he wants to die, let's give him a quick death." Zhu Kei's face darkened for a moment, but she silently said in her heart, "President Yun, what are you saying? You've already tortured him to such a miserable state, and now you want to give him a quick death." She suddenly felt that the man was very pitiful. She looked at him sympathetically and thought to herself, "You can offend anyone, but you chose to offend Hurricane Group's #1 Demon King. Die early and reincarnate early." Yu Yu suddenly asked, "Do you pity him?" She quickly shook her head. "Kill him." Chapter 1386. Mu Yaja nodded. "Leave his life to me." With that, he handed Yu Yu to Vermilion Bird and walked toward Mu Lianjue. Lowering his head, he looked down at him condescendingly with a cold glint in his eyes. "Do I hate him? Do I hate him?" he asked in his heart. There was no doubt that he hated him to the core. He was the one who had poisoned his father. Back then, his father had a car accident. However, the autopsy report concluded that his father, who had never touched drugs before, was actually a drug addict. He had smoked marijuana and even injected a large amount of heroin when he was alive. Hence, when he drove, he had hallucinations and caused a tragic accident. He had never believed that his father would do drugs. In his mind, Mu Lianxing had always been self-disciplined and would never touch such things. However, even if he had his suspicions, it was an undeniable fact. He did not expect that all of this was caused by Mu Lianjue. If it were not for him, his father would not have died. His mother, on the other hand, had taken chronic poison for many years. She had passed away at a very young age due to illness. Both of his family members had been killed by him. This was Mu Lianjue. A heartless and unscrupulous person who would do anything to fight for power. The series of events that followed were all his doing. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes. He had always been puzzled. Mu Lianjue and his father were biological brothers. Even if they did not have the same mother, they were still related by blood. Why would he do this? Why would he do such a cruel thing? This was the answer he had always wanted. Now, however, he realized that the so-called answer was no longer important. So what if he got the answer? His father and mother would not come back to life either. The dead were gone. It was time for him to let go of the grudges of the previous generation. However, he should be the one to decide Mu Lianjue's life. At the thought of this, Mu Yaja clenched his jaw and pursed his thin lips into a stiff line. Then, he abruptly grabbed Mu Lianjue's neck and tightened his grip, not holding back at all. Mu Lianjue abruptly woke up from his groggy state under such immense pressure. His pair of eagle-like eyes abruptly widened, but they were bloodshot and crimson as if they were filled with blood. The muscles on his face twitched. Because of the excessive suffocation, his entire face had swelled to the color of a pig's liver. His pair of eagle-like eyes were glaring angrily under the terrifying suffocation. He could only feel that under the overwhelming twisting force, his consciousness was becoming increasingly weak. Ugh, cough, Mu Lianjue's eyes popped out of their sockets. The blood in his body gushed to the top of his head, and even his eyeballs could not move. Mu Yaja did not say a word. He did not have the patience to waste any more words. He only wanted to settle all the grudges and grievances with his own hands at this moment. This man before him. He hated him to the core. Mu Yaja stared fixedly at him. Suddenly, scenes flashed before his eyes like a carousel lantern. In his memory, the one that left the deepest impression on him was Mu Lianqing's extremely strong arms. When he returned home from work, he would always lift him up and kiss his forehead. Chapter 1387. Baby, you're back. He loved his mother's long, black hair the most. When she was seriously ill, he would take good care of her by her bedside and carefully wash her hair. Every time those black strands of hair flowed through his fingers, he would look at his mother's pale face in the mirror, and his heart would uncontrollably surge with sorrow. However, all of this once beautiful life, was suddenly shattered. It was all destroyed by this man. He was left alone. You deserve to die. Mu Yaja's voice was low and furious. Every word he uttered seemed to be squeezed out from the roots of his teeth, and they were filled with endless hatred. Mu Lianjue, you deserve to die. Mu Linfeng could not bear to watch this scene and turned away. Yu, who was in Vermilion Bird's arms, looked at Mu Yaja's stiff back view and felt a sharp pain in his heart. His heart ached for his daddy. He did not know what kind of childhood his daddy had. At least, it was not a happy one. Unlike him, no matter how sick and weak he was and how much humiliation he suffered, he still had Yun Shishir by his side to protect him and accompany him gently. His daddy was different. He had lost both his parents when he was young. In such a big family, where power intertwined, he must have had to tread carefully along the way. Under Mu Yaja's strong grip, Mu Lianjue's throat was broken. His eyes rolled back as he breathed his last. Mu Lianjue was dead. Similarly, the family feud that spanned 2 generations had ended. Mu Yaja stood up and stood in the strong wind with a cold and lonely aura. At that moment, the cold wind suddenly became bitterly cold. It raged wildly as if it was clamoring fiercely. Daddy. Yu looked at Mu Yaja and suddenly called out softly. Mu Yaja turned around, his ink-black hair fluttering in the wind. His eyes were bloodshot, but the moment he turned back to look at Yu, they slowly faded away as if they were silk being peeled from a cocoon and returned to their original state. Daddy, hug. Yu smiled gently and opened his arms. Mu Yaja walked over and hugged him in his arms. Yu hugged his shoulders softly and looked up with a warm smile on her face. Daddy, you have me in the future. You're not alone. Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. His eyes warmed as he hugged her even tighter. I don't only have you. Yes. You still have mommy. Mu Yaja scratched the bridge of his nose. I still have Xiao Yichen. Yu smiled. Xiao Yichen once asked me if it was okay for the 4 of us to be together forever. While Mu Yaja was still in a daze, Yu laughed and said, in the past, I was still hesitant. One is so stupid, and the other wants to steal mommy from me. Now, I've made up my mind. After a pause, Yu suddenly became serious and said seriously, Daddy, let's be together forever. You, Mommy, Xiao Chen, and I. The four of us will be together forever. Is that okay? He asked with a serious expression, but his tone was unprecedentedly serious. Mu Yaja was stunned for a long time. He was so surprised that he couldn't react for a moment. This was probably the first time Yu had confessed to him. In the past, this little guy was always so arrogant and cold in front of him. He was never close to him, and even if he cared, he never said anything. He was very awkward. Chapter 1388. To him, this was the biggest surprise. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would hear such warm words from his little mouth, which had always been filled with poisonous thorns. For a moment, Mu Yaja couldn't believe it. It was as if he was in a dream. Hence, he didn't snap out of it immediately. Yu saw that he was slow to react and was a little unhappy. He snorted arrogantly and said unhappily, Why aren't you saying anything? Are you unwilling to do so? Mu Yaja hurriedly said, No. Little idiot. Yu pouted and pouted. He was a little unhappy. If you're unwilling, you don't have to force yourself. Don't think that I approve of you. If you weren't the man that Mommy liked, I wouldn't have bothered with you. His arrogant words reverted to Yu's usual noble and cold demeanor. Mu Yaja smiled and rubbed his forehead dotingly. Okay. This time, he would let him say whatever he wanted. Do you think that I want to be with you? Seeing that Mu Yaja still didn't say anything, Yu was even more unhappy. He looked at him with disdain. If I wasn't worried that you wouldn't dote on Mommy enough and bully her, I just want to be with Mommy forever. Don't misunderstand. Mu Yaja continued to smile dotingly and echoed his words. Okay. His agreement made Yu even more unhappy. Why didn't he say anything? Yu was unhappy. Hey. You. Mu Yaja's eyes suddenly drooped as he gently kissed the boy's forehead. Following that, he placed another warm kiss on the boy's eyelashes. His indulgence was self-evident. Yu was stunned. Then, he heard Mu Yaja's gentle voice above his head. Yu, let Daddy dote on you forever, okay? Yu was stunned. He did not expect Mu Yaja to say something so heart-wrenching. We've missed each other for 6 years. During these 6 years, I had no idea that I had such a smart and adorable son other than Xiao Chen. As Mu Yaja spoke, his eyes fell on Yu's palm-sized face. He couldn't hide the heartache in his eyes. Forgive me for missing you for so long. I made you and Mommy wait for so long. I made you miss out on 6 years of fatherly love. I'm sorry, forgive Daddy. This was probably the most emotional thing Mu Yaja had ever said. If Yun Shishir and Xiao Chen were here, they would definitely feel indignant. Especially Yun Shishir. Even in front of her, Mu Yaja had never said such touching words of love. Yu blushed when he heard this. However, the shyness in his eyes quickly disappeared. He looked up and couldn't help but chide his son. What's the use of saying sorry? Humph. Her haughty and awkward behavior really made people feel cold. Yu pursed his pink lips slightly. However, his heart was filled with warmth. It was as if a spring breeze had brushed past and a warm current was flowing through him. Little fool, maybe you're secretly laughing in your heart. Mu Yaja couldn't help but expose him. A look of panic flashed across Yu's face. Then, he snorted and said, When did I? Humph. There was even more disdain in his eyes. The father and son looked at each other and suddenly smiled. Yu finally relented. Okay. I'm a great person and won't hold a grudge against you. I'll be merciful and forgive you. Mu Yaja kissed him. The heartwarming scene diluted the cold and solemn atmosphere around them. Li Hanlin stood behind them and rubbed his forehead helplessly. Chapter 1389. Mu Linfeng was a little moved by this scene, but but he could not bear to disturb this heartwarming scene. He quietly got into the car and left. After Mu Lianjue's death, the funeral was naturally handled by him. Of course, he ordered everyone to keep their mouths shut about what had happened tonight. His subordinates carried the body back and ordered the hospital to write a death report. After that, arrangements were made according to the circumstances of the death. To Mu Yaxia and Yu Yu, all of this seemed to have never happened. It was just the death of an insignificant character. However, when Mu Linfeng brought the news of Mu Lianjue's death back to the family, it caused quite a stir. Mu Shumin, in particular, found it hard to accept the news of Mu Lianjue's sudden death. Mu Shumin naturally did not believe that Mu Lianjue had passed away due to illness. Although Mu Lianjue's health was not good, he was still strong enough. It was hard to link it to his death. Moreover, it was too sudden. There was no relief at all. Moreover, with the things that had happened in the Mu family these past few days, it was hard for them not to associate Mu Lianjue's death with Mu Yaxia. However, even though Mu Shumin repeatedly asked about the cause of Mu Lianjue's death, Mu Linfeng only brushed it over and did not mention what had happened tonight. In fact, he was even a little impatient. Since he was unwilling to say anything, Mu Shumin naturally did not dare to ask. If Mu Shumin did not dare to ask, the rest were even less qualified to mention it. In just a few days, the Mu family was at peace. To the public, it was only announced that Mu Lianjue had passed away due to his worsening illness. A solemn funeral was held and he was buried in peace. Of course, this was all for later. On the way home from the south entrance of the expressway, Yu Yu sat in the front passenger seat, unable to calm down. Mu Lianjue's death could be considered as a weight off his mind. Then, he thought of Mu Wanru. So, the little boy turned his head and asked, "Daddy, I heard that Mu Wanru has been placed in the Mu Group's private hospital. I heard that her condition is not very optimistic." The corner of Mu Yaxhia's eyes twitched fiercely as he sighed with emotion. "You're really well informed." "Of course." Yu Yu sniffed proudly like a mischievous little elf. Her eyes were bright and sparkling. "I won't let anyone who offends my mommy off. Even if they escape to the ends of the earth, even if we have to dig 3 feet into the ground, we will dig them out." Mu Yaxia was speechless. "Baby, do you know what kind of boys girls are most afraid of these days?" What? Yu Yu was perplexed, unable to comprehend what was going on. "Mama's boy." Mu Yaxia said faintly, "You're the world's first mommy's boy that I've ever met." Ha ha ha. Yu Yu was elated and revealed a rare hearty smile. "That's because before Daddy appeared, Mommy only had me. If I don't pamper Mommy a little, who will?" Mu Yaxia was taken aback. He could actually detect a hint of bitterness in his calm voice as he recalled all those unbearable memories of the past. His heart sank. Even though Yu Yu's tone was calm and nonchalant, the memories of the past 6 years were still vivid in his mind. He was probably feeling indignant for Xianxia. In his heart, his mommy was an elegant princess. A woman like her should be doted on by everyone. Chapter 1390. Mommy had been living such a hard life all this while. She had tasted the bitterness of the world. He hoped that his mommy could be happier. Happier. When he thought of this, he said unwillingly, "Mommy is still very young. She's only 24 and has suffered a lot. I feel that it's so unfair. I can't accept it." At this point, he glanced at Mu Yaxia and asked, "When do you plan to hold your wedding with Mommy?" "I haven't thought about it yet." Mu Yaxia said honestly. "You're not ready?" Yu Yu seemed unhappy with this answer. "Not really." Mu Yaxia paused. When they reached a traffic light junction, the car stopped. He turned his head and answered seriously, "I haven't thought about how to give her a perfect wedding." In the past, he only felt that weddings were an insignificant formality. Perhaps it was because he had never thought that there would be such a person who would make him seriously consider how to create a romantic and perfect wedding. However, now, he also had some romantic fantasies about his marriage with Xianxia. When it came to romance, men always seemed to lack some cells compared to women. Actually, that was not the case. Did men not understand romance? That was not the case. A man did not understand romance only because that person did not appear. When Yu Yu heard this, he felt gratified but also jealous. He could not bear to part with her. I can't bear to let mommy marry you. He revealed the conflict in his heart honestly. Wuxia frowned. This kid, his mommy was marrying him. Why did this little kid give off an inexplicable feeling of melancholy? And this kind of melancholy was like a father who had experienced the vicissitudes of life and was about to marry off his beloved daughter. Li Hanlin had once said that Yu Yu and Yun Shishir were mother and son in some ways. However, when Yu Yu hid that side of him behind Yun Shishir's back, Yu Yu doted on his mommy more like a daughter. It was a sense of déjà vu between father and daughter. It was as if ethics had been reversed. Wuxia's lips twitched. Yes, that was the feeling. Yu Yu was like a father who couldn't bear to see his daughter get married. Just as he was feeling awkward, he heard Yu Yu's daddy mumble again, I suddenly feel that it's so unfair. Unfair? Yes. I feel that I can't let you take advantage of me for nothing. My mommy is as beautiful as a flower, gentle and kind. The people who want to pursue my mommy could line up from my doorstep to Siberia. Why should I let you beat me to it? The more Yu Yu spoke, the more indignant she became. She clenched her fists and snorted arrogantly, you didn't even go through the process of courtship. No, I can't let you pass. Daddy, I can't let mommy marry you like this. It's too easy on you. Wuxia was stunned. Why, tell me, you disappeared for 6 years for no reason. Now that you've reappeared, you didn't even go through the process of courtship. How can I let you marry mommy so easily? However, Wuxia felt that the little kid's silent scheming was really interesting and adorable. Seeing that he had made the decision in all seriousness, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and ask, oh? There are conditions? Yes. Of course. Yu Yu said matter-of-factly, you didn't even go through the process of courtship, love letters, dating, or courtship. Humph, that's not fair. Wuxia was stunned. Chapter 1391. You actually went on a date with mommy behind my back? Yu Yu smelled a hint of adultery and there was a dangerous glint in his eyes. It doesn't count. It's not formal enough. If you want to marry my mommy, you have to start from a formal courtship. Yu Yu concluded. Wuxia kept quiet. Courtship? Yes, do you know how to court girls? No. Can you teach me? Wuxia's expression was serious. What he said was true. He had never courted any girl before. Basically, the women around him couldn't wait to get close to him. He had never taken the initiative. You don't even know how to court girls. So, how about you be daddy's strategist? Wuxia asked humbly with a sincere expression. However, Yu Yu retorted, I can't even bear to let mommy marry you. How can I be your strategist? Dream on. Wuxia kept quiet again and glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. Yu Yu did not back down and looked back at him from the corner of his eyes. The father and son faced each other in silence. Wuxia pursed his thin lips. He had learned his lesson. To put it bluntly, this fellow was unwilling to let his mommy marry him. Hence, he deliberately made things difficult for him. This was a test for him. If he could not bear to marry mommy, he should have just said so. The little fellow was so awkward because he could not bear to let mommy go but was too shy to express it. On the other side, Yu Yu said lightly, Daddy, mommy doesn't belong to you yet. If you don't hurry up, there will be so many people courting mommy. Humph. These words were obviously a threat to him. Wuxia smiled deeply, but his eyes were filled with gentleness. Back to Shangdi Walk. In the time it took for him to park the car, Yu Yu flew into the house and hurriedly ran into the bedroom. He carefully pushed open the door, tiptoed in, and silently made his way to the bedside. Yun Shishir was sleeping soundly. She did not seem to realize what had happened tonight and was still immersed in a gentle dream. Yu Yu felt relieved when he saw that she was sleeping soundly. When he went out tonight, he secretly wanted to settle things behind her back. Yu Yu had always been like this. In a corner where Xianxia could not see, in a small detail that she could not detect, he arranged everything for her. No matter how big the devil he would kill God and God would kill God. Whenever mommy's SSSS, he would be zzzzz. Even if he had to fight against the heavens, even if he had to be the enemy of the world, he would wholeheartedly protect her and ensure her safety. Yu Yu squatted down and leaned over the bed, looking at her gently. When his gaze met Xianxia's sleeping face, his gaze instantly softened and became as gentle as water. It was as if Xianxia, who was sleeping on the bed, was the most beautiful treasure in the world in his eyes. It made him want to take pity on her. A strand of hair fell between her eyebrows and intertwined with her thick eyelashes. He gently reached out and brushed the strand of hair away, tucking it behind her ear. She was extremely sensitive. Even if it was from Yu Yu's tender fingertips, that slight touch was enough to make her, who was in her dreams, let out a muffled moan. It was as if she was talking in her sleep. Afraid that he would disturb her, Yu Yu immediately withdrew his hand and blinked innocently. He was afraid that he would wake her up. Xianxia's delicate lips opened and closed, letting out a soft murmur before returning to being docile and quiet. She did not wake up. Chapter 1392. He poked Xianxia's soft cheeks with his fingertips and muttered to himself, "Mommy, I can't bear to marry you off. This is a very selfish way of thinking, isn't it?" His gaze fell on Xianxia's sleeping face. Suddenly, he was a little distracted. Indeed, he couldn't bear to part with her. How should he put it? It was a very strange feeling. It was as if the person he had always cared for and protected with all his might would no longer belong to him alone one day. From a certain perspective, wasn't it a kind of loss as well? Or perhaps, even though he and his mommy had depended on each other for 6 years and had developed an inseparable bond, marrying off his mommy would always make him feel a little lonely. This kind of loneliness was not something that Wuxia and Xiao Yichen could give him. Just as Li Hanlin had said, from a certain perspective, his mentality was indeed similar to that of a father who couldn't bear to marry off his daughter. Yu Yu sighed and looked down. "Mommy, don't worry. If you're happy, that's my happiness. If you're not happy, wouldn't Yu Yu's hard work be meaningless?" When he thought of this, he leaned over and gently planted a kiss between Xianxia's eyebrows. "My dear mommy, good night." After saying that, he carefully tucked the bedding in for her and left silently. When Wuxia finished parking his car and walked in, Yu Yu had already washed up and changed into her pajamas. Standing at the door, he rubbed his eyes. "Daddy, good night." Wuxia smiled. "Good night, baby." Yu Yu smiled and waved her hand. Just as she was about to enter the room, she suddenly thought of something. She turned around and walked in front of Wuxia. Then, she hooked her finger at him mysteriously. Wuxia saw that Yu Yuan seemed to have something to say. He bent down slightly and looked at Yu Yuan at eye level. Yu Yu suddenly leaned over and kissed his forehead gently with her pink lips. Ba gee, he took a bite. It was fragrant. Wuxia was stunned. He never thought that the little fellow would take the initiative to kiss him. A goodnight kiss? He smiled gently, and his heart felt warm again. Tonight, this little fellow had warmed his heart to the point of bursting with joy. Yu Yu clasped her hands behind her back and lowered her head shyly after the kiss. She seemed very awkward and bashful. Seeing Wuxia's stunned and surprised expression, he explained, "Good night kiss." "Stupid daddy." "Yes." Wuxia was still a little slow on the uptake. The surprise came too suddenly. The little fellow actually took the initiative to say goodnight to him. In the past, he wouldn't have dared to think about it. Seeing his indifferent reaction, Yu Yu could not help but be annoyed by his slowness and clumsiness. Was that all he could do? Yu Yu could not help but feel hurt. He had taken the initiative to give him a goodnight kiss. In the end, his stupid daddy was like a block of wood. Did he not know how to give him a goodnight kiss? Thinking of this, he muttered angrily, "Stupid daddy." Then, he turned around and was about to enter the room. However, just as he turned around, Wuxia suddenly picked him up from behind and held him in his arms. "Good boy, baby." Wuxia's slender fingers pinched his chin. His thin lips brushed past his ears and landed on his pink cheeks. Mwah. It was a light kiss. A reply to his goodnight kiss. Yu was slightly distracted. Then, her face turned red and she pursed her lips. She was clearly a little shy. All right. Chapter 1393. Wuxia carried him back to the room and turned on the wall lamp. As soon as the warm wall lamp was turned on, Wuxia and Yu were stunned when they saw the scene on the bed. Then, both of them frowned at the same time. She saw little Chen sleeping soundly on the bed, but his sleeping posture was as restless as usual. At this moment, he was like an octopus with his small arms and legs sprawled out, occupying more than half of the bed domineeringly. He was even snorting soundly at this moment. "Daddy, look." Yu complained pitifully. "This guy is restless every night. I don't want to sleep in the same bed as him. Every morning, I'm almost squeezed off the bed by him." Wuxia was speechless. "Daddy, does he usually sleep like this in the Mu family?" Yu asked. "Yes. His sleeping posture is terrible," Yu criticized mercilessly. Wuxia sighed heavily. "Yes. This probably had something to do with his sleeping habits." Xiao Yichen's bed in the Mu family's bedroom was very big. It was 3 meters wide and 4 meters long. Therefore, the little guy had developed the habit of sleeping in an unrestrained manner since he was young. After all, the bed was very big and spacious. Therefore, he had always been used to acting wildly on such a big bed. Therefore, he could not adjust to the fact that he had changed to a 2-meter bed. However, Yu was different. When he was younger, he and Yun Shishir slept on the same bed. Yun Shishir slept very quietly. Basically, she would sleep in the same position when she woke up. If she was not disturbed, she would not change her position for the entire night. When Yu was older, he could not afford to change to a bigger bed. He slept on a 1.5-meter bed. Therefore, he slept very peacefully. After meeting Xiao Yichen, Yu finally realized that some people could behave wildly in their sleep. Sometimes, Yu really wondered what Xiao Yichen was dreaming about. Why did he fall asleep and move so much? There were several times when he was woken up by this fellow. He really wanted to wake him up, pinch his face, and ruthlessly ravage him. Wuxia said sympathetically, "Baby, it's been hard on you." Yu was speechless. After a moment of silence, he suggested, "I want to change to a bunk bed." He slept on one bed while Xiao Yichen slept on the other. Wuxia agreed. "I'll send someone to buy one tomorrow." "No need." Yu said, "I'll book one for myself tomorrow." Under Leji Holdings, there was a smart children's bed. It had 2 bunk beds and an intelligent sleep system. It was very popular. He was the one who researched and designed it. Just as well, he could book one and experience the results of his own design. Wuxia was speechless. This son of his was really not an ordinary genius. At his age, he did not even know how to draw. His son could already sleep in the smart children's bed that he designed. The pupil had surpassed the master. However, he felt very proud of it. His 2 sons were so outstanding. "Go to sleep." Wuxia carried him to the bed and covered him with a blanket. Yu glanced at Xiao Yichen, who had been chased to the side by Wuxia. His disdainful expression softened slightly. "Daddy, you have to sleep early too," he said softly. Wuxia smiled and walked to Xiao Yichen's side. He also planted a goodnight kiss between his brows. When he left the room, he turned off the lights and closed the door. He went to the bathroom to wash up before returning to the bedroom. Chapter 1394. At this moment, it was already late into the night. It was pitch black outside the window. There were no stars in the sky, only the bright moon was gradually covered by dark clouds. There was a light lamp at the head of the bed. He walked over and looked at the person on the bed. She was sleeping soundly. There were traces of someone gently twisting the blankets. Thinking about it, you must have come in just now and twisted the blankets for her. This considerate little guy always hid his gentleness in the bottom of his heart. If this blissful little woman knew that her son had silently done so much for her, she would definitely be touched. However, Yu had never let her know. He had always hidden this gentleness behind her back, silently protecting her in a place where she could not detect it. Wuxia got onto the bed. He leaned forward slightly and pulled her into his arms. His movements were extremely gentle and careful, afraid that he would disturb her. He placed her head on his arm and stroked her cheek with his fingers. Wuxia lowered his gaze and looked at her face. At this moment, the person in his arms was sleeping quietly. Her gentle and quiet sleeping face was as warm and peaceful as the years in the world. When she was quiet, the beauty of her face became even more flamboyant. However, this flamboyance didn't reveal its sharpness. It wasn't dazzling, but it was docile and quiet. Occasionally, one would catch a glimpse of her beauty and realize that there was a shocking charm hidden in her beauty. In that instant, even his heartbeat uncontrollably calmed down. He was afraid that if his heartbeat became stronger, it would disturb her in her sleep. Hugging her in his arms, he felt a sudden surge of emotion in his heart. That was, he wanted to present the most beautiful treasure in the world to her and give it to her. However, on the other hand, he felt conflicted. Wasn't the most beautiful treasure in the world sleeping quietly in front of him right now? Perhaps, in his eyes, there was no treasure in the world more precious than this. Yu's words suddenly rang in his ears. In my eyes, Mommy is the most beautiful treasure in the world. Mommy is the most beautiful gift given to me by God. Even if I have to become the enemy of the world, I will protect her to the fullest. If you love her, please treat her well. Lest she wander about in misery, lest she have no one to rely on. All right. Wuxia could not help but ask. I will definitely take care of you properly. He nodded slightly and whispered gently into her ear, Sure, I'll pursue you, okay? His question was gentle and quiet. However, in her sleep, she would not respond to him no matter what. Wuxia's lips curled into a smile as he turned off the wall lamp and pulled her into his embrace. Holding her in his arms, he fell asleep in a soft dream. When Xianxia woke up in the morning, it was already dawn outside the window. However, due to the heavy curtains, the room was dimly lit. She opened her eyes and saw Wuxia's peaceful sleeping face. Her heart froze, but at the same time, she felt exceptionally warm. She didn't know when he came back, nor did she know when he fell asleep. He must have gone to bed very late. He hugged her shoulders, and his palm quietly rested on her waist. His thick weight made it easy for her to feel the warmth from his palm. The happiest thing in life was to wake up with you. In the morning, the first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was him. How wonderful. Chapter 1395. Xianxia woke up, but she did not get up. She just quietly nestled in his arms and looked at him. She was surprised to find that this man was especially good-looking when he was asleep. When he was awake, he was the pride of the heavens and the elite of the empire. He shone brightly, as if he was the reincarnation of the emperor. His eyes were handsome, and his body was sharp. His exquisite features were arrogant and sharp. It was as if all the darkness had nowhere to hide when he opened his eyes. However, when he was asleep, his sharpness was restrained. He was quiet and deep. His eyes were gentle and his handsome features were different from his usual radiance. They were extremely gentle. Xianxia's gaze fell on his sexy thin lips. His lips were very thin, and his lips were arrogant and even a little sharp. She could not help but reach out and touch his lips with her fingertips. Her fingertips traced the line of his lips and carefully traced the shape of his lips. It was said that people with thin lips were fickle in love. Xianxia pursed her lips slightly. She felt that this was simply a fallacy. However, in her heart, this man was extremely affectionate, even loyal. Yin Shishir looked up and her gaze fell on his eyes again. When he was asleep and his eyelids were closed, she could see his deep eyeliner and his thick and long eyelashes. His eyelashes were ridiculously long and his eyelashes were very deep. She finally understood who Yu had inherited his beautiful eyelashes from. Usually, when he opened his eyes, he gave people the feeling that his gaze was very deep, extremely evil, and breathtaking. It turned out that he had a pair of deep eyeliner like Yu and Xiao Yichen. Especially his eyelashes that were like the feathers of a black phoenix. They were so beautiful that even gods and men would be envious of them. So much so that she was a little jealous. Why did the heavens dote on him so much and mold him to be so perfect? However, on second thought, it was all thanks to the heavens that they loved him so much. Yu and Xiao Yichen had inherited his excellent genes. When she thought of this, she instantly felt satisfied. Yin Shishir secretly reached out and fiddled with his eyelashes. From time to time, she would pinch them between her fingers and gently stroke them. It's very thick. She was like a naughty kitten, lazily nestled in his arms, lazily playing with his eyelashes. She seemed to be enjoying herself. In his sleep, Muyaja's brows were slightly furrowed, as if he was annoyed. He subconsciously reached out and swatted her little hand away. She was unwilling to give up. When he was deep in sleep, she reached out her hand and played with his eyelashes. Her fingers then moved to his eyebrows and carefully rubbed them. Her fingertips then fell between his eyebrows, trying to smooth out the wrinkles between his eyebrows. Why did the men here look so serious even in their sleep? Why did they always frown? She rubbed it carefully, trying to smooth out his furrowed brows. All of a sudden, Muyaja opened his eyes. He raised his eyelids and his deep pupils shone with the light of awakening. She was instantly embarrassed. "You're awake?" Could it be that he was woken up by her disturbance? She furrowed her brows in annoyance and bit her lip. Her movements were very gentle. Little did she know that this man had always been a light sleeper. Even the slightest movement would wake him up easily. The moment Muyaja opened his eyes, the sharpness in his eyes disappeared. However, when his vision cleared and reflected on her delicate face, the sharpness quietly faded away. Chapter 1396. After he brushed it away, she persevered and continued to play with it, as if she was never tired of it. She whispered, "You're awake? Did I wake you up?" You should have come back very late last night." "Did you sleep very late? What were you doing just now?" he asked in a deep voice. His voice was a little hoarse and deep because he had just woken up, and it was especially sexy. She could still hear it, and her heart instantly went numb. Feeling a little guilty, Yin Shishir snorted and avoided the topic. "I'm not doing anything." Could she say that she was bored when she woke up, so she secretly played with his eyelashes? Or was she envious of his long eyelashes? They were so beautiful that she couldn't help but get addicted to playing with them. He would definitely laugh at her for being bored again. "What are you doing?" The man pursed his lips, obviously doubting her words. "I see that you're full of energy early in the morning." Yin Shishir blushed and immediately defended herself. "I woke up. After reading the script yesterday, I went to bed very early. My biological clock woke me up naturally." So? Muyaja raised his good-looking brows. "So, she had to wake him up when she woke up." Yin Shishir glanced at him and couldn't help but explain. I woke up a long time ago. I was bored when I woke up, so I was counting your eyelashes when you were asleep." Counting his eyelashes? What kind of game was this? Muyaja furrowed his brows and asked, "Have you counted clearly?" "No." How could she count clearly? It was like a brush. If she had such thick eyelashes like his, she would save the effort of brushing them. Little did she know that as soon as her voice fell, the man's tall body flipped over and covered her body in a dark mass. He supported himself with his arms by her side. With just a stretch of his hand, he gently lifted a strand of her hair that had fallen on the pillow. He sniffed at the tip of his nose and lowered his eyes. Obviously, he enjoyed this fragrance very much. Opening his eyes, his handsome eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of playfulness. Then, I'll give you another chance. The man smiled evilly, bowed his head, and leaned closer to her. Their noses touched, and their lips touched. His warm breath brushed against her face, incomparably intimate. A clear voice rang in her ears. Count how many eyelashes I have. Xianxia blushed slightly, and then she unnaturally avoided his overly deep eyes. She muttered in a low voice, I'm not counting anymore. What is it? Wuxia brushed her hair, but was puzzled. You were counting happily just now. She felt powerless and said lazily, there are too many. I can't count them all. Your eyelashes are so long and dense that my eyes hurt from counting them. All right. The man smiled and kissed the corner of her lips lazily. Sticking to her lips, his thin lips escaped from her lips. Since you're so energetic and don't count your eyelashes, let's do something else. Xianxia was stunned. Soon, she could hear the hidden meaning in his words. His words were obviously referring to something else. A wisp of red flew to her ears, and like a fire spreading, it burned her cheeks. Soon, her entire face seemed to be smeared with rouge, revealing a charming shade of red. Hey! You! Stop fooling around. Her shyness, in his eyes, had a hint of wanting to reject him. Chapter 1397. Why, you don't like it? The man raised his eyebrows arrogantly and whispered into her ear. Between his smile, there was a hint of cynicism. Coupled with that clear voice, it was damn charming. In his eyes, it was as if there were stars that had been cut up, sparkling and sparkling. Being stared at by him like this, Xianxia's face grew increasingly hot. Her originally jade-like face was dyed with a rosy blush, exuding a delicate, tender, and translucent glow. She was obviously a little shy. The man was openly acting like a rogue in front of her. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to crawl under the blanket. Wuxia curled his lips into a smile. Originally, he thought that this woman would have gotten used to it, but now it seemed that he had not taught her well enough. Thus, he pinched her waist with his large palm. The soft touch immediately made him groan in pleasure, but his heart felt extremely comfortable. He was very satisfied with this soft touch, so he planned to do some morning exercises that were beneficial to his body and mind in this beautiful morning. While he was thinking about this, his hands had already begun to move. He skillfully stripped off her underwear and bent down to cover her cherry lips. This kiss seemed to have been premeditated for a long time. Nestled in her embrace, that pink little mouth opened and closed as if it was a silent invitation, luring him in. His heart had been itching for a long time, so when he lowered his head to look at her, it was as if he had found a prey to aim at. He stared fixedly at those pink pouty lips and pressed down on her. However, many erotic images flashed past his mind. As a man, he always had many erotic fantasies towards the woman he loved. Wuxia was the same. His mind filled with erotic images, and his body wrapped in the blanket became even hotter. Even though they were separated, the changes in his body were obvious. When Xianxia felt the heat, her heart suddenly beat like thunder, and her face felt as if it was cooked. He peeled off her pajamas and pressed his lips against hers, delicately embellishing her lips. At first, he was extremely careful and his kisses were gentle. Slowly, as the temperature in the room rose and turned white, he was no longer restricted to this light kiss. Gradually, he became fierce and wild. He held the back of her head with one hand and deepened the kiss. He wished he could turn into a beast and swallow her whole. He was lying on top of her, his two strong and sturdy arms supporting her on both sides of her shoulders, controlling her in a narrow space. His strong and fit body pressed down on her, leaving almost no room for maneuver. The ferocious kiss almost made her unable to breathe. Xianxia couldn't keep up with his pace. Her mind was blank, and she felt like she was about to suffocate. Xianxia punched his shoulder in annoyance, but the man ignored her and only sealed her lips, sucking and licking. He actually kissed her until her lips were swollen. Sweet, it was extraordinarily sweet. Wuxia couldn't help but be infatuated with the overly sweet breath on her lips. He parted her lips and passionately invaded, engulfed, and lingered. Xianxia was gradually melted by this fiery kiss, turning into warm and soft jade water. Unknowingly, the pajamas on his body were quickly removed, and the two of them were entangled together. He possessed her. Chapter 1398. For a moment, the room was filled with the charms of spring as the temperature rose rapidly. After a round of passionate lovemaking, he hugged her and immersed himself in her warmth as he savored the aftertaste of love. However, even after doing it a few times, he still did not know when to stop and teased her from time to time in an attempt to arouse her. However, she did not live up to his expectations and did not respond at all. She was also indifferent to his teasing. It was too tiring. At this moment, Xianxia seemed to have been drained of all her energy as she lay limp in his arms, unable to move at all. Even lifting a finger was difficult. She laid lazily in his arms. It was not easy for her to accumulate enough energy after a night of recuperation. At this moment, under his torment, it all collapsed and she was exhausted again. Her eyelids were heavy. She lazily half-opened her eyes and looked out of the corner of her eye, only to see the man leaning against the head of the bed and looking down at her. His eyes were playful and mischievous as if he was mocking her for not living up to his expectations. He pinched the bridge of her nose and said, "Your stamina is too weak." When Xianxia heard this, she could not help but feel angry. Could she blame him for this? Her stamina was not bad. But did he not see how ruthless he was when he wanted her just now? The deep invasion almost made her whole body fall apart. She was a little disappointing, but wasn't it all for him? Did he think that everyone was as strong as him, as if they never knew how to be satisfied and tired? The anger in her eyes made him laugh. Wuxia pinched the tip of her delicate nose lovingly and teased, "Why, are you not convinced?" Xianxia bitterly slapped his hand away and said in a muffled voice, "Don't mess around. I'm a little tired now." She looked down tiredly and felt that after the battle just now, her eyelids were starting to fight again. "I know you're tired." Otherwise, he would not have let her off so easily. He said in a deep voice. He did his utmost to suppress the dark desire in his eyes. Now, he was doing his utmost to restrain it. At the same time, a playful look appeared in his eyes, making one's face redden even more. She couldn't help but feel a little defeated. She raised her eyes to look at the man in front of her. He was like an arrogant emperor, lazily and elegantly leaning against the headboard. His gaze fell on her face. There was teasing, mischievous, playful, but most of all, there was a mischievous smile. This smile was mixed with a bit of devilish charm, but it also seemed like he was harboring evil intentions, as if he was mocking her disappointing physical strength. Xianxia was furious. The more she looked at him, the more indignant she felt. This man was too vile. The way he looked at her really made her feel ashamed. When he thought about how he had used those embarrassing postures to take advantage of her, and how she had sunk into this dark, turbulent wave of passion. When he thought about how she had sunk into it, and how she had let out some tender chuckles, she felt even more ashamed and buried her face deep into the pillow. No. It was too embarrassing. At this moment, she wanted nothing more than to ruthlessly bang her head against the wall or find a hole to bury her head in. She was like a shy little bunny in front of him. However, her shy actions in his eyes were adorable and extremely cute. He couldn't help but lower his head and gently peck her red cheeks. The scene just now seemed to be unfinished as his body changed again. He frowned and cursed in his heart. Chapter 1399. Xianxia glanced at the man's tensed expression and her face turned even redder. She muttered, "What a horrible man." Then, she crawled under the blanket and wrapped herself up. Wuxia chuckled inwardly. This woman is deliberately avoiding me. Could it be that he had frightened her? Wuxia suppressed his desire. Even though he hadn't had enough fun, he was still in a good mood after the morning exercise that was good for his body and mind. At the same time, he still felt dissatisfied. This woman's physique was a little weak, especially when it came to her physical strength. It seemed like she had to exercise more. He hadn't had enough fun, but she was already tired. This made him a little unhappy. However, he was a man who knew when to stop. When necessary, he wouldn't act rashly and alert the enemy, so as not to scare this little woman. After all, some things had a long way to go. A person's life was so long. He and she had a lot of time to study this. Hence, he wasn't in a hurry. He got out of bed and walked to the bathroom. After taking a cold shower to calm himself down, he walked to the door. Just as he turned the doorknob, he felt a weight on the door. Just as he opened the door a crack, two little lads, who were leaning against the door and listening attentively, were caught off guard and rolled in. Yu was the first to roll in. She was caught off guard and fell face first onto the floor. She groaned softly. Ah, Xiao Yichen was the first to scream. He lost his balance and fell onto Yu's body. Yu cried out in pain again. The two squishy little balls fell onto the floor like a human pyramid. Xianxia was shocked by the sudden sound. She peeked out from under the blanket and saw this scene. Her face turned so red that it looked like blood was going to ooze out. Hence, she crawled back under the blanket without a sound. This time, she was too ashamed to crawl out of the blanket. Woo, was there anything more embarrassing than this? Xianxia wanted to cry but had no tears. At the same time, he was secretly annoyed, but at the same time, he was worried about when these two little fellows had been hiding outside, and whether they had heard anything. The two little fellows were still so young. They wouldn't learn anything bad, right? Wuxia also seemed to have not expected this. He was stunned in place, and his handsome face darkened. A storm was coming. He had never thought that these two fellows would actually be eavesdropping outside the door, and even let him catch them red-handed. What happened? He questioned in a deep voice, but there was a trace of unhappiness in his words. Xiao Yichen's ears perked up. As soon as he heard Wuxia's unfriendly tone, his little face paled. He knew that he had done something stupid. It's over. He seemed to have made Daddy unhappy. Xiao Yichen awkwardly got up from Yu's body and stood up helplessly. He lowered his head and clasped his hands together nervously, not daring to look up at him. Daddy, he called out timidly and weakly. His voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzzing. It was obvious that he knew that he had done something wrong and was extremely ashamed. Wuxia's gaze was cold and intimidating, and his face was filled with anger. What are you doing? Xiao Yichen could not answer. He nervously tugged at the corner of his shirt, looking like a timid little deer. Chapter 1400. Xiao Yichen didn't know how to answer, so he glanced at the ground for help. In the end, he saw Yu lying on the ground motionlessly, pretending to be a corpse. Xiao Yichen was speechless. Yu's behavior was a classic example of betraying a teammate. At this moment, the little guy kept telling himself that he was just passing by and didn't know anything, he was innocent. It was definitely not the right time to stand up and laugh it off. Since he was unfortunately discovered, Yu had his own tricks up his sleeve and would be able to escape this ordeal. Wuxia glanced at the corpse on the ground and his lips twitched. Then, he stretched out the tip of his foot and gently kicked his round little butt. Duang, he said, get up. Yu remained motionless, lying face down on the ground and ignoring him. No reaction. No reaction at all. Wuxia raised a brow as his heart skipped a beat. He was suddenly a little worried. He remembered that Yu was the first to rush in and fell face down. Xiao Yichen, who followed closely behind, fell on top of him and pressed him down heavily. He didn't know if it hurt him or not. Wuxia squatted down and stretched out his hand to pinch his cheeks. Then, he picked up little Munchkin, who was lying limply on the ground, and turned him over. At a glance, Wuxia saw that his forehead was red from kowtowing. It seemed to be bruised. Little Munchkin lifted his head and opened his eyes innocently. He blinked and his eyes were misty. He seemed to be in pain from the fall. When he blinked, a crystal-clear teardrop rolled down his cheek. "Daddy, it hurts," little Munchkin called out softly. Coupled with his innocent eyes, he looked at Xiao Yichen with grievance and resentment. Wuxia immediately lost his temper. Xiao Yichen, who was standing at the side, was so shocked that his mouth was wide open. Was this even possible? Feeling wronged, Yu pursed his lips and retorted, "Daddy, why did you suddenly open the door?" "I lost my balance and fell." Wuxia felt wronged. "Who told you to eavesdrop outside the door?" He couldn't help but say in displeasure. Sob. Yu clutched her chest in agony, as if she had been wronged. She made sure to portray the word pain in her heart. "Daddy, how dare you accuse me? Eavesdropping? How could you do something so despicable?" "Humph." Yu is angry. Wuxia was rendered speechless by his words. Darling's heart is so cold, Wuxia was speechless. At the side, little Yichen's eyes widened as he sucked in a breath of cold air. "If you weren't eavesdropping, then why were you standing by the door?" Wuxia asked and looked at little Munchkin's tearful face suspiciously. Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other and said confidently, "We were just passing by." Wuxia's lips twitched even more. He narrowed his eyes and was obviously skeptical. "Passing by?" "Yes. Passing by," Yu said seriously. Wuxia didn't believe her at all. "Little liar." Really?" Yu suddenly wiped her tears and smiled obediently like a polite and humble gentleman. "Actually, I just finished making breakfast and wanted to come over and greet Daddy and Mommy. I also wanted to ask when Daddy and Mommy are having breakfast." Chapter 1401. Xiao Yichen was speechless, Wuxia was speechless, Yunshusher was speechless as well. Yu tilted her head and smiled like an angel. She was pure, and harmless. "Good morning, Father. It's 8:00 in the morning. Would you like to have breakfast?" Xiao Yichen's shoulders trembled. He thought to himself, there are so many smiles in the world, but Yu is the only one who makes me feel that her smile is scarier than her poker face. It's more hair-raising. He felt that she was very two-faced. "Ahem. What's for breakfast?" Wuxia asked quietly. Yu's lips curled up and she smiled even more beautifully. "Bread, milk, poached eggs, and ham." Wuxia was stunned. Then, he said, "I like poached eggs." Yu kept calling him father, and he felt a little smug. In an instant, he completely forgot about the two glutinous rice balls eavesdropping outside the door. Xiao Yichen was dumbfounded. He and Yu were indeed not on the same level. Even someone as smart as Daddy was completely under Yu's control. With a bright smile on his face, he asked, "Oh, right. My dear father, I've also fried deep-fried dough sticks. The outside is crispy and the inside is tender. The taste is superb. Do you want to try it?" Wuxia nodded in a daze. Then, he carried Yu to the dining room. Xiao Yichen was dumbfounded. He was petrified on the spot. Yunshusher hid under the blanket and couldn't help but snicker. Ha 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 ha. She was amused by Yu's smart and adorable look. She was amused. This little fellow was really a little shrewd. He had his daddy in the palm of his hand. With just a few words, she managed to coax Wuxia into having breakfast while avoiding the main point and dwelling on the trivial. Otherwise, this matter wouldn't be over. If Yu wasn't around, Xiao Yichen might have been taught a lesson. Yu saved him from the abyss of suffering with just a few words. She wasn't simple. Xiao Yichen learned and experienced what it meant to be scheming. "Mommy." Xiao Yichen stood at the door and called out to Yunshusher. Yunshusher emerged from the blanket with a blushing face, only to see the little boy leaning against the door with a blushing face. He shyly greeted, "Mommy, good morning." With that, he ran off. Shyly. The two little guys didn't intend to eavesdrop. They rushed over to invite Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir to the dining room for breakfast. However, when they reached the door, Yu leaned against the door and pricked up his ears to eavesdrop on the sounds in the room. Xiao Yichen also leaned forward. However, not long after, the door was suddenly opened. The two little lads failed miserably at such a simple task, and both of them fell in together. Yun Shishir was amused. She covered her mouth and laughed until she collapsed on the bed. With two children at home, she felt that every inch of her life was bright and sunny. Xiao Yichen and Yu were probably the best gifts that God had given her. In the dining room, Yu personally fed Mu Yaja a deep-fried dough stick. The latter took a bite. The golden skin was crispy and the inside was tender. It was indeed delicious. "You made this?" he asked in disbelief. Yu raised his eyebrows and was obviously very proud. "Yes. Of course it was made by me." Mu Yaja wasn't stingy with his praise. "Your culinary skills are better than many chefs in star-rated restaurants." "Oh, this is nothing. You haven't really experienced my culinary skills." Yu pretended to be reserved. Chapter 1402. After Yun Shishir woke up, she received a call from her manager all of a sudden. "Shishir, are you feeling better?" Yun Shishir replied, "Yes, I'm feeling better." He heaved a sigh of relief, but his voice was filled with worry. "Your phone has been switched off recently. It wasn't easy for me to get through to you. I asked Mu Shi, and she said that she couldn't reach you either. We were so worried." "I'm sorry. Something happened at home recently. That's why it's been inconvenient for me to switch on my phone." Yun Shishir felt extremely guilty. The manager sighed helplessly and said, "It's okay. I thought something had happened to you, so I was worried." During this period, Yun Shishir had disappeared from the face of the earth. She did not reply to any messages, and her phone was switched off when he called her. That was until Minyu sent someone to inform Ji Lin that Yun Shishir was on leave. Only when the manager learned of this did he feel relieved. For the past 2 days, Yun Shishir's phone had been switched on, so she replied to his messages. Qin Zhou, on the other hand, had been overseas for the past few days. The moment he returned, he turned on his phone and saw Yun Shishir's reply in his inbox. He quickly called her back. After a pause, he asked in confusion, "What happened at home?" It's a long story." Yun Shishir did not know how to start. Qin Zhou, however, was extremely sensitive and comforted her. "It's okay if you don't want to talk about it. Artists need privacy and personal space, too." "I can understand that." "Yes. Thank you, Qin Zhou." He asked, "Are you free recently? If you are, can you focus on your work now? While you were away, the studio accumulated a bunch of drafts waiting for you to destroy them." Yun Shishir fell silent, as if she was facing a formidable enemy. Therefore, after breakfast, she hurried to the studio. The moment Qin Zhou saw her, he gave her a harsh scolding. Although his tone was gentle over the phone, he took the opportunity to give Yun Shishir a good scolding. It was not because of anything else but because she had made him so worried, so he must teach her a lesson. Yun Shishir's temper dissipated after being scolded. She sighed. "Qin Zhou, I'm sorry. Something happened at home recently. That's not what I'm angry about." Qin Zhou snorted and said coldly, "I'm angry because you didn't tell me what happened and made me so worried. I thought you had been kidnapped." Yun Shishir fell silent. "It's not that exaggerated." "Why not?" Qin Zhou rolled his eyes at her. "Shishir, you have to understand that I treat you like family. If you need anything, please let me know." Halfway through, his tone suddenly softened. "Otherwise, you'll make me worry to death. I won't be able to eat or sleep in peace." Yun Shishir's heart warmed as she sincerely said, "Thank you, Qin Zhou." "What are you thanking me for?" Qin Zhou rolled his eyes at her and changed the topic. "Let's not talk about this anymore. Have you finished reading the script?" "I did." Qin Zhou added, "We're going to start filming soon. You have to be careful and show off your acting skills." Okay. Yun Shishir kept it in mind. Naturally, Qin Zhou was not worried about her acting skills. Yun Shishir's acting was not a problem for her to play the leading role in the production of Lethal Beauty. Oh right, do you know who the male lead of Lethal Beauty is? I don't know, Yun Shishir shook her head blankly. Qin Zhou said, "The first young actor in ancient costumes and the hottest young actor in Huanya right now, Hua Jin." Chapter 1403. Hua Jin. Yun Shishir took half a second to react. This name sounds familiar. Qin Zhou rolled his eyes helplessly. "Sister, can you be more careful and take more remedial classes? Hua Jin is in the limelight now, okay? If he stands right in front of you and you don't recognize him, it will be very embarrassing." Yun Shishir was speechless. Qin Zhou glanced at her and added, "Besides, Hua Jin's background isn't as simple as it seems. So you have to be more careful. Stay away from him on set and don't get too close to him." Yun Shishir did not ask too much. She just followed whatever Qin Zhou said and did not ask why he said that this Hua Jin was not a simple person. She only thought that since Qin Zhou asked her to be more careful and avoid him, he must have his reasons. She just had to be obedient. Qin Zhou nodded in satisfaction. He especially liked this about Yun Shishir. No matter what he arranged or ordered her to do, she just did it obediently and rarely asked why. Even if she did, it was just a question out of curiosity. She never protested. She was a very obedient artist. She was very docile and did not have any sharp edges. In fact, she was probably the artist he had taken over the most. There were not many obedient artists in the entertainment industry. This showed that Yun Shishir had a lot of trust in him. He was very touched by this. Qin Zhou gave her some instructions. Hence, he asked her to wait for the makeup artist in the office. There was an exclusive interview with a fashion magazine in the afternoon. She was going to be interviewed and shoot a set of blockbusters. Yun Shishir nodded obediently. Qin Zhou went out. He had an appointment with a producer. There was a hit drama in the middle of filming and they were still short of a supporting role. Hence, he wanted to insert Yun Shishir into the cast so that she could be recognized. Although it was a supporting role, no matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. More importantly, this hit drama had a good reputation. The ratings for the second part of the drama were still shocking and it was firmly in the top 2 spots in the charts. One had to know that many popular dramas would lose their popularity by the time the second part was filmed. The main point was that this hit drama was being filmed and broadcast at the same time. After filming this episode, after 2 weeks of post-production, it would be broadcast on TV. Qin Zhou naturally had his reasons for making such arrangements. Previously, Yun Shishir had become popular mainly because the team of The Green Apple had promoted her on Weibo by publishing behind-the-scenes footage. However, now that the filming of The Green Apple was completed and it was in post-production, there would be a long period of silence. Therefore, Qin Zhou naturally had to use some means to get some exposure for her. It was a good choice to play a supporting role in this popular drama. Most importantly, this supporting character's persona was very good at eating. If Yun Shishir could get this opportunity and participate in it, it would definitely increase her exposure. Of course. He was determined to win this negotiation. Therefore, he gave Yun Shishir a few instructions and left in a hurry. Yun Shishir stayed in the company to memorize the script. There was an exclusive interview in the afternoon with Bazaar Fashion. Hence, Bazaar naturally arranged for their own makeup artist to do her makeup. At noon, the makeup artist arrived. Yun Shishir saw a fashionable face. "Hello, I'm Andy, the chief stylist of Bazaar Fashion." Andy smiled at her, revealing a bright but stiff smile. Chapter 1404. Yun Shishir furrowed her brows and unwillingly reached out her hand to shake hers. However, the moment she held Andy's outstretched hand, she felt her grip tighten. Her grip was so strong that it almost deformed her hand. Yun Shishir instinctively flung her hand away. Looking up, she frowned and looked slightly unhappy. She felt that the smile on Andy's face was extremely stiff and didn't seem very friendly. However, this was only their first meeting. Why did she feel that Andy's gaze was filled with hostility? What's the matter? Andy saw that her expression was slightly cold and couldn't help but laugh. Yun Shishir, your attitude doesn't seem very friendly. You're shaking my hand too hard. Yun Shishir paused and pursed her lips. You're hurting me. However, Andy laughed and looked her up and down. She said in a neutral tone, I didn't expect that a newcomer who just debuted would put on such airs. Were you acting like a big shot in front of me just now? Forget it, there's no need for that. Acting like a big shot? Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment and quickly reacted. This arrogant stylist in front of her was mocking her. It looked like this stylist wasn't very friendly to her. Even though she didn't understand why this person called Andy had such a hostile attitude towards her. She spoke in a neutral tone and was so sarcastic. They were meeting for the first time, but she acted as if they were enemies. Was she crazy? Did she have a grudge against her? Or had she offended this person in the past and she couldn't remember? Yun Shishir quickly brushed off her humiliation with a smile and coldly said, even if you want to act like a big shot, you still have to look at your capabilities. Your words are too much. Yun Shishir's words were very public and there wasn't anything wrong with her wording. However, when it came to Andy, she seemed to be deliberately twisting her words. She snorted coldly and said in a mocking tone, Capital? You're a newcomer, what capital do you have to act like a big shot? TSK. Yun Shishir, I've been in the industry for so long and you're the smallest celebrity I've ever worked with. If it weren't for the chief editor's orders, do you think I would be willing to serve you? As soon as she said this, Yun Shishir instantly understood. She was a very sensitive person, so she could tell from Andy's words that he was dissatisfied with her. Andy had humiliated her and treated her unkindly, not because she had a grudge against her, nor was it because she had offended her in the past. This Andy probably had a place in bizarre fashion. She claimed to be the chief stylist. Stylists with the title of chief must have a big background. Basically, only those who had participated in many fashion shows and received so many awards that their hands went numb were qualified to receive this title. Bizarre Fashion was one of the top international fashion magazines and had a place in the fashion industry. Most of the stylists under it had a strong background. Therefore, the stylist who was crowned with the title of chief was even more impressive. According to gossip, some chief stylists boasted of their high status and were very picky about the celebrities they served. Some stylists were even rejected by artists below the C-list level. This Andy looked very arrogant. The reason why she was so sarcastic to her was probably because she didn't want to be her stylist. After all, she had just debuted and acted in a movie and a few print advertisements. She wasn't very popular and didn't even have a high status. Chapter 1405. In other words, it was obvious that she despised Yun Shishir because of her low status. Yun Shishir's guess was correct. The reason why Andy was so hostile towards her was because she was unwilling to be the stylist of such a low-status artist. A newcomer who had just debuted could not even be considered a C-lister. Although she had been popular on Weibo for a while because of the hype created by the production team, she did not have a substantial reputation. After all, one's status was not determined by how popular one was on Weibo. It was determined by one's net worth. To put it bluntly, even if one was popular on Weibo, it would be useless if one was not popular in the industry. Yun Shishir's current salary was only 5 figures for a single episode. If she met a big shot production team, she might have to fork out resources. When Andy received this assignment, she was disgusted. She did not want to take on such a low-status artist. After she received this assignment, the other people in the company mocked her behind her back for a long time. When they heard that she was going to take on a low-status artist, many people made cynical remarks about her. Originally, with Yun Shishir's status, there was no way she would be able to get an interview with Bazaar. This was mainly because Qin Zhou had added fuel to the fire behind the scenes. He had used the resources he had accumulated when he was managing Wuxia Xianxia to secure this interview for Xianxia. The chief editor had arranged for Andy to take over. Andy was furious. She rejected it again and again, but the interview had already been decided. There was no way she could reject it. After all, she was the chief stylist of Bazaar Fashion. The artistes she had taken care of were either superstar actresses, or even famous carpet stars. Xianxia, on the other hand, was just a small fry who had popped out of nowhere. She had acted in a movie directed by Lin Fengtian. Now that the filming had finished and it was in post-production, the movie had not been released yet. No one knew how the box office would be after it was released and whether it would be a flop. However, these were not Andy's concerns. What she was concerned about was that Xianxia did not care about fashion at all. Dressing like this for an interview with Bazaar was obviously an insult to her. In the fashion industry, many stylists and makeup artists were proud and arrogant. This was especially true for a famous stylist like Andy. If it was in the past, when some celebrities wanted to accept a fashion interview, they would have 3 layers of support and then dress up meticulously for the interview. What about her? She was wearing a simple dress and a knitted sweater. Her black hair was draped over her shoulders. Her attire couldn't be any lower. Andy only felt disgusted. Therefore, she was bent on disgusting her. Xianxia was speechless. She quietly said, "I'm sorry. It's really hard for you to receive a small-time artist like me." His words were filled with bitterness, and there was even a hint of self-mockery. Andy was stunned. She thought that Xianxia would fly into a rage out of humiliation after being humiliated by her. In the end, she didn't seem to be angry, nor did she retort. Instead, she went along with her words and made a self-deprecating joke. Andy instantly lost his temper. What else could she say when the other party had already claimed to be a lowly celebrity? Thus, she asked coldly, "Have you hit your face?" "No." Xianxia said, "I just finished eating." Andy was speechless. Chapter 1406. Andy's expression was especially displeased as she sneered, "Hey, are you deliberately making things difficult for me? You know that you're going to be interviewed and filmed in a blockbuster, so why don't you prepare your foundation first? Are you waiting for me to do it? I just received the notice of the interview at the last minute, so I didn't know about it beforehand." Xianxia paused for a moment, then said calmly, "Whether it's you or me, an interview is a job, so there's no need to be so aggressive with me. If you want me to prepare my foundation first, then I'll do it myself first and leave the rest to you." Although she said this, Andy didn't appreciate it at all. She rolled her eyes but didn't say anything sarcastic. However, her expression was still extremely cold. Xianxia went to the makeup room and started to carefully prepare her foundation. Her skin was very good. Like other artists, they couldn't wait to cover their faces with 5 layers of foundation. However, she only needed 1 layer and it would be perfect. Hence, Xianxia walked out very quickly. Andy was shocked. "Why are you so fast? It's already done." Andy frowned and said sarcastically, "You don't have to be so perfunctory, right? In any case, you're the one who needs to be filmed. Is it really okay to be so perfunctory? If the foundation isn't good, my makeup will be smudged when it's done. There are many ignorant people who think that they're born beautiful and don't need to prepare a foundation. In the end, didn't they end up in such a sorry state?" Xianxia raised her eyebrows, then Master Andy, "Do you want to see for yourself if my foundation passes?" Andy said impatiently, "Go sit in your seat. I'll do your makeup first. Anyway, it's your face in the mirror. Even if the foundation isn't done well, it has nothing to do with me." After saying this, she glanced at the corner of her eyes and signaled. Xianxia sat down obediently. Andy walked over and raised her head. She saw that elegant and refined face in the mirror. Clear, jade-like, flawless, beautiful. Although she had only put on a layer of foundation to balance her skin tone, she hadn't put on any makeup, and she hadn't even outlined her eyeliner. However, at first glance, her refined temperament was completely natural. She was like an otherworldly celestial in a painting, beautiful to the extreme. She suddenly felt a burning sensation on her face, as if she had been slapped. It was a slap in the face. At this time, she had no choice but to admit that some people were really born beautiful. Even if it was just a thin layer, it could still shine brightly. Andy bit her lip unwillingly and began to put on her makeup. Even though she had some prejudices against Xianxia, Andy was very professional when it came to styling. Although she had always been arrogant, she was very dedicated and professional when it came to her career. When it came to professionalism, her attitude was serious, and she could not afford to be careless. This time, the style used for the interview was pure and innocent. Therefore, Andy used Japanese crystal nude makeup for her. However, nude makeup required the most exquisite technique and foundation. Whether it was the eyeliner or the blush, it had to be extremely natural and fresh. Therefore, when the makeup was done, Xianxia in the mirror presented a different kind of beauty. Pure and beautiful. Every frown and smile revealed a kind of youthful sweetness. Chapter 1407. Andy looked at the beautiful woman in the mirror. For a moment, her heart was filled with jealousy and disgust. The disdain in her eyes became more obvious. Xianxia, do you know why I hate you so much? Andy suddenly looked at the person in the mirror and asked coldly. Xianxia was stunned and confused. She shook her head blankly. Andy's words were sharp and vicious. I hate you, not because of your low status, but because of your disgusting ambition and face. She had always been a straightforward person. If there was something on her mind, she would say it. She didn't like to hide anything. Xianxia asked calmly, ambition? I admit that you are very beautiful and have outstanding innate qualities. Also, I've seen your performance and your acting is indeed very powerful. But in my life, what I hate the most are female celebrities who do anything to get to the top. After she finished speaking, her eyes were filled with an overbearing sharpness that was extremely sharp. Xianxia smiled faintly. I don't know what you're talking about. Seeing her attitude, Andy was even more certain that she was like what she had imagined. She would use any means to create hype and get to the headlines. Her impression of her fell to the bottom. She went straight to the point and asked, You're the one who created the rumor about you and Gu Xingzi, aren't you? You're so scheming. Andy sighed and narrowed her eyes. Her eyes were filled with disgust. There are many people like you in the entertainment industry. Just because you're in the same movie as Xingzi, you're starting to think that you're infallible. You've just debuted and you're already thinking of climbing up the social ladder? Recently, the rumor about you and Xingzi has been spreading like wildfire. I think you must have taken a fancy to Xingzi's unshakable popularity and used it to create hype for yourself. Moreover, you shamelessly tied yourself to Xingzi to get to the top. How can you be so disgusting? From the beginning to the end, Xianxia only looked at her calmly. After listening to her in one breath, she suddenly smiled. You don't have to be so agitated, do you? Xianxia looked at her through the mirror and suddenly smiled, but exposed her. You're so excited. You must like Xingzi, right? Andy's face turned red as she angrily rebuked, Don't talk nonsense. Is that so? Xianxia, however, smiled with interest. But, I see that you're so excited. If I didn't know, I would think that I stole your boyfriend. Shut up. Andy flew into a rage out of humiliation. Don't make wild guesses. I don't treat Xingzi the way you described. Xianxia glanced at her and actually thought that this Andy was so awkward that it was adorable. His words clearly revealed his fanatical worship and yearning for Gu Xingzi, as if he was a god, but his words were extremely awkward and he refused to admit it. Oh. Then why are you so agitated? Besides, how do you know it's a publicity stunt? What if Xingzi and I are a couple? Xianxia deliberately teased her. However, Andy was more innocent than she thought. When she heard Xianxia's teasing words, she immediately exploded. What? You're dating Xingzi? Xianxia deliberately kept her in suspense. This has nothing to do with you. How does it have nothing to do with me? Tell me, what's your relationship with Xianxia? Andy was so nervous that her face turned red and she looked like she was about to cry. Chapter 1408. It's a secret. After saying that, she stood up and went to change her clothes. Andy was left standing on the spot with a sullen expression, clenching her fists in anger. The chief editor of the interview quickly rushed over with the cameraman. First, they shot a set of fashion photos for Yun Shishir in the studio. Yun Shishir changed into a pink floral gown from Chanel's spring collection. She wore a flower crown on her head, had wavy hair, and wore a pair of red high heels. She looked sweet. Previously, when she was undergoing training at Huanyu, Yun Shishir had a strong sense of being in front of the camera. Now, standing in front of the camera, she was able to move freely. Every pose did not require much explanation. She could naturally express the ideal state that the cameraman wanted to express. At times, she would hold the photo frame and rub her hair lazily with one hand. She would pout and pretend to be annoyed. At times, she would hold a lollipop in her hand and widen her beautiful eyes in surprise. She looked playful and cute. At other times, she would lean lazily against the wall, her curly hair slanting over her round shoulders and the corners of her eyes slightly curved. The cameraman took a few sets of shots in a row. During the intermission, he held the camera and browsed through the photos taken, but he could not bear to delete a few. Her performance was too good. She was blessed with beauty and performance. At this moment, only one word came to his mind. God's favorite. God doted on her too much and gave her such perfect looks. Standing at the side, Andy's mind was blank. Her thoughts were still stuck on Yun Shishir's purposefully mysterious words. What if Xianxia and I are a couple? What does that mean? What is her relationship with Gu Xianxia? Are they really a couple? That's impossible. Gu Xianxia was famous in the industry for keeping women at arm's length. He was quite cold and ascetic. There were almost no women around him. Apart from some groundless rumors, most of them were created by the women. He was a rare and high-quality idol. Many people in the industry even suspected that he was gay. So much so that after so many years in the industry, almost every woman who acted with him had a clean relationship with him. This was simply a wonder in the industry. However, when Andy thought about it, he was stunned. Xianxia had been involved in a few scandals, but they were all created by the woman. In the end, Gu Xianxia's studio came forward to clarify the matter. However, this time, Gu Xianxia's studio did not do anything about the scandal with Yun Shishir. Instead, they cooperated with Yun Shishir's team to hype up their relationship. This would have been impossible in the past. With such an ambiguous attitude, it was hard not to think of something. Could it be that what Yun Shishir said was true? Was she really dating Gu Xianxia? Andy's eyes shone as she looked at Yun Shishir, who was in the studio, continuously matching the photographer's style. The sweet and gentle smile on her face was clearly that of a woman deeply in love. Could it be true? Andy's heart skipped a beat, and he began to fidget. In fact, the reason why she was so concerned about this problem was that she had been in love with Gu Xianxia for a long time. From the first time she met Gu Xianxia, she was infatuated with this aloof and handsome man and regarded him as her Adonis. Chapter 1409. Andy had silently supported him since he was a popular young actor when he first debuted to the current popular Heavenly King. But now, the man she could only wish for was actually in a relationship with another woman. She was naturally upset. Bazaar fashion editor, did you accept the role of the Green Apple by chance or coincidence? Yun Shishir, at that time, the Green Apple was holding a national audition for the female lead. Coincidentally, I was selected by director Lin and accepted the role. Bazaar fashion editor, which character do you like the most in the script? Yun Shishir, I prefer Yin Shechuan. Bazaar fashion editor, why? What is it about this character that attracts you? Yun Shishir, Yin Shechuan is a very pure character. She is a stubborn person. Love is love. If you love someone, you will give it your all, even if you have to make the whole world your enemy. Her stubbornness and infatuation move me. Bizarre fashion editor, have you read the original novel before accepting the role? Yin Sure, I have read the original novel. It is very well written. I stayed up late to finish reading it. Bizarre fashion editor, when you read the novel, did you ever think that you would be playing your favorite character one day? Yin Sure. I didn't think of that. Bizarre fashion editor, compared to reading a novel, how does acting feel? Yin Sure, reading a novel and acting are two different concepts. When you read a novel, you will be immersed in the world of the novel. You will be influenced by the love and hate entanglements. You will be immersed in it and your emotions will follow the plot closely. However, when you act in a movie, it is different. Every detail had to be carefully grasped. Every emotion had to be placed